This engine, a high bypass turbofan jet engine, this is the engine that is on all military tankers and all commercial carriers, is in essence a jet-powered fan. 90% of the air that moves through this engine is non-combusted. This engine, by design, is nearly incapable of producing any condensation trail except under rare and extreme circumstances. And again, we have film footage of aircraft flying at altitude with nozzles visible, turning on and off. That is the end of the argument. Since even before man could fly, there was an effort to try to modify the weather. We have weather modification patents going back 100 years plus.
It starts with a simple question and ends in objective reality. Through our journey from there to here, we find one another and ourselves. And as the next 24 hours breaks free from our last, we gaze onward in reflection of the day.
Come to your own conclusions. Stay vigilant.
Welcome to the Daily Wrap-Up.
Monday, July 7th, 2025. Thank you so much for joining me today. Interesting discussion today. I stumbled across something that I'm well versed on when it comes to the overlap of a few different conversations. Geoengineering, weather modification, cloud seeding, all could be perceived as different things or overlapping conversations. But this discussion that kind of came off the typical partisan kind of throwing out things that aren't necessarily verified in the moment to, in some cases, cover up something that was wrong or something that didn't happen. Overall, something that nonetheless has always, as we've discussed at the time, been something you could prove to some degree or another. And we've talked about geoengineering, weather modification, going back a very long time on this platform. One of the things we say about this all the time, or plenty of topics we discuss, is there's mountains of evidence to show you that this is something that has been tested, worked on, to the point to where we talked about Brennan, I believe, speaking at the what was that again? I think it was the CFR. I forget the exact location, but Brennan speaking in 2018 about a geoengineering program, or Harvard doing their own. And it's interesting the way people still regard that. The point is that these things are very real, in my opinion, because the evidence shows that. It doesn't stop them from being used or lied about, manipulated to alter the way people perceive things or use it at times to distract. I'm only saying that to discuss it in the way that it's applied in the partisan field today. Now, when we discussed the predictions around January 4th, for example, and the storm happened on Texas, a lot of people started talking about the potential of weather modification. I felt that was sort of a way to distract from the fact that a lot of other predictions didn't take place. As I said at the time, at that moment, as I said, we pointed to it, and what I was looking at the evidence did not in any way indicate that you could prove at that moment that you could see that there was weather modification. But as you know, as I do in anything, even things that I'm in everything we look at, I will dig as far as I can to try to find evidence, try to find something that backs it up. And I found something very interesting that goes back a while, connects to a lot of things we've talked about, whether Peter Thiel or, just about everything we're discussing today, which I don't want to jump the gun because AI is where this is going. It overlaps with this very interesting conversation. I found something that people are discussing quite broadly, but not getting as much reach as it should, around a group called a company called Rainmaker, and something that is working on cloud seeding. And it turns out there's clear evidence that he's working in Texas and had been doing this. Now, the question of whether this was done on the July overlap, he's denied that. We'll go into the evidence. But the reason I'm discussing this today is not just that story, because I feel like we've covered pretty extensively that weather modification is real, and it's interesting we still have to debate that. And of course, we've seen it thrown out at times when there's not much evidence to back it up, but it's still interesting and worth considering. But then when I saw this other part of the story around something that I wasn't even that well aware of, about how much water artificial intelligence, or rather more specifically just data centers, but largely AI data centers today, how much they consume in order to answer Grok's question, for example, or that's not the best way to frame that, but when you ask and when Grok is engaging and you ask and it responds, the amount of water that's used, the question being, and we can go over the facts, the info that we're seeing today, it's disputed, that the water that's used, fresh water, in order to just have that process happen. I was kind of blown away by this. And so then when I start standing back and looking at a couple different pictures, like the water conversation, which we've talked about a long time, it's not really that, I think everyone's considered whether water will or when it will become sort of the next disputed or war, whether when the water wars, when people start fighting over control of water because it becomes a resource diminishing resource rather, that thought is not new. And if and when that will come to pass. But this starts to overlap. The reason I said that is because looking at past actions of government and what they've done around the control of water and why that was always, control, being able to have water that others need. It made sense. But then when you look at the bigger picture around something like this, you start to wonder, was this always part of this kind of plan? Things like Flint, for example, or Nestle, or the Texas conversation in general, in a different context around the people who own the majority of the fresh water. All these things started to become a lot more relevant. And I just wanted to consider it in that picture today and talk about, one, the alarming reality of what's happening in that AI direction, the amount of water that's needed, and then back to the question of weather modification, whether or not weather is being modified in order to increase the amount of water that we currently have on the planet. It's a very interesting thought. Now, as always, we'll theorize about anything, regardless of how people might think, reflexively call something crazy. We're not. If and when we can prove something, then we'll make the claim. But up until then, of course, we can consider these things. But what I thought was fascinating is going back to the Texas point. It is interesting to find the person that seems to have been involved there. And thanks to people online who are pointing these things out, which is where I found it, that this person's connected. And back to Peter Thiel and back to artificial intelligence. And it's worth investigating. So trust me, that's just whetting your appetite. Stay tuned today to watch all this, because there are some things that are, including the Rainmaker company and of course, on none other than Sean Ryan's podcast, having a conversation about weather modification, and literally mentions Texas and cloud seeding. And so it's not disputed whether they're claiming they've done this in Texas. It's whether or not it happened right around that time frame. And why wouldn't it be if it's something that's been ongoing? And why then would he say online that that's not the case? It's worth considering and very interesting, but it goes into a lot of different avenues. So stay tuned. I think you're going to find this very interesting. And it's not some frivolous kind of random conversation that's rooted in nothing but hype. There's facts today that are very interesting that I think are worth your time. So let's start with a couple of points that I wanted to show you that aren't necessarily the focus of today, but I wanted you to see just so we didn't lose them, because it's important, so you don't miss it in all that's going on today. I will be talking about this in the next show, but this was yet another whistleblower, an IDF member who spoke up. An Israeli reservist who served in Gaza has told Sky News IDF troops killed Palestinian civilians at random. Now, this shouldn't be that shocking if you watch this show, if you have eyes, if you're objective and honest, but some people still have trouble out there about this obvious conversation, but especially since there's been numerous other whistleblowers in the IDF who have already come out and said, yes, that's what's happening. Or we have the recent Haaretz article saying they were ordered to shoot at innocent people and civilians. So let me play this just so you don't miss that. I have two other points on this opening thing that relate to Epstein and a couple of things we're going to get to, because we are going to talk about Epstein, obviously, the reality of how, it's just, it's funny. I didn't even get into it just right there to start. It just seems like it's probably the least important story, not the Epstein story, but the fact that they lied about it like we knew they would is probably the least important thing to discuss today. But it's clearly overtaking the conversation, but it's worth pointing out for a couple of reasons. And we'll show you some of the things that I do think are relevant and how it does tie back to Israel and even possibly to the larger conversation today. But we will talk about it because it's relevant and it's interesting to see what's developed around that. But once we get past that, we'll be talking about the rest of it today. But I'm including this because I think it's important to connect, you can't decouple the Epstein conversation from Israel. But there's been many examples like this. So I'm going to play this and to show you the points that relate to Israel before we get into the Epstein overlap.
An Israeli reservist who served in Gaza has told Sky News IDF troops killed Palestinian civilians at random, with orders to shoot sometimes dependent on the mood of the commander. The IDF strongly denies the claim, saying it operates against military targets, not civilians. Our international correspondent, Alex Rossi, has the story for us.
I think everything in a war is kind of messes you up.
It is rare to hear Israeli soldiers speak openly about their time in Gaza. But after 3 tours of duty, this reservist says his conscience won't let him stay silent.
Every commander can choose for himself what he does, so it's kind of like Wild West. And so some commanders can really decide to do war crimes and do bad things and like don't have very consequences of that.
He agreed to talk on condition of anonymity, fearing he could be labelled a traitor or ostracised at home. These photos were taken while he was serving in Gaza, where he was stationed in the homes of displaced Palestinians.
I think you can't be in this scenario for so long and not like normalize it and not like kind of you lose your mind and then killing is more and more normalized and you can't see the problem in it. Kind of feel like I took part of something bad, and so I think it's like I need to counter it with something good that I do. And I hope that by speaking of it, it can change like how things are being done. And I think a lot of people, if they knew exactly what's happening, they wouldn't. It wouldn't go down very good for them, and they won't agree with it.
Alex Rossi, Sky News.
Now, what's crazy to me, and obviously, the reason I'm playing this to start, obviously I didn't have to include this today, is because it's important that we make sure we don't lose sight of this, right? It's considered eating your vegetables in the conversation today. We have to understand how important this is and how much this is not slowing down. It's worthy of notation every single day, if not the focal point. But what's crazy is that, even the way he's discussing that, it's like even, and maybe it's just that I don't know how you can talk about committing genocide or murdering innocent people with such a blithe tone. I don't know. It's hard for me not to hear that, but at least he's coming up and speaking about it and telling people about it. But it just is kind of crazy to think about what's been done to this society. Now, just really quickly, this part is just another, this is what, the 6th one? This is the one I've been playing for a while. This goes back to what, 6 months ago?
Do you think that you witnessed war crimes taking place?
Probably. The ground assumption is that they are Hamas. And then if you go this way, you're bound to kill people that are not.
Now, in a rare interview, one soldier tells us about...
And it goes on. The point, guys, I just how we can still pretend like we don't all know. And I think we all know, and we all aren't pretending that. What's crazy is that it's becoming evident, like self-evident, that literally everybody sees what's happening, and that still has no effect on whether your governments do what they want. Make of that what you will. And whether they're being influenced, told, blackmailed with the conversation today by some other entity. It's just absolutely insane this is still happening the way it is. Plenty of more to go over that topic. We'll come back on another show and get into it in depth. But it just doesn't slow down, guys. And including this as well, we just showed in a recent show from Haaretz, in case you missed it, directly from the IDF. It's a killing field. That direct quote from the IDF. Soldiers ordered to shoot deliberately at unarmed Gazans waiting for food. Everywhere you can see this, but all these governments still act like we're just not sure. Because they're disgusting, they're liars, they're dishonest, or they're completely blackmailed. Frankly, at this point, I don't really care anymore. I don't have any concern about how you got yourself into a backward, into a corner position where you're being blackmailed. I mean, it's a point I'm just getting tired of having to act like this is not obvious. I said, yet another whistleblower telling you what is self-evident at this point. Israel's murdering the unarmed, innocent people. Israel's committing a genocide. That's what's happening. Now, Kevork Almacian, to add to this point, in case you didn't see this was today. This was the date, it was June 23rd, but this is making the rounds today. While we're busy chasing the Epstein client list that they'll never give to us, that does exist, here's what you missed. The Trump administration has revoked the foreign terrorist organization designation from Al-Qaeda. Hayat al-Sham, but this is the same, not, it's literally AKA Al-Nusra Front, AKA Al-Qaeda's branch in Syria. Gee, can you piece together why? Because they now are working with that group, with Israel, to control what's going on the ground. So Israel's working with a terrorist group. The U.S. is working with a terrorist group. Surprise, surprise. We've always been telling you that. They're a proxy element of the U.S. and Israel. It's funny how it's all clicking into place. Yet still, people will tell us we're crazy for saying that for the last decade. Here we are, one more time. But on top of that, don't forget, as we get into the Epstein point, here's Dan Bongino being asked, what is dear to your heart? Do you remember what he said?
What cause is dear to your heart?
Cause is dear to my Israel, the defense of Israel.
What is number one?
Yeah. Didn't even take a beat. Kind of makes sense when you really break it down. Now, before we get into it all, I just think it's worth pointing out. I mean, the obvious, by the way, Whitney's work, monumentally important, that everyone should be going to first to understand how long this has been obvious. And I mean, I don't even just mean the fact that it's been, I mean, everything. I mean, just how far she's ahead of this and how obviously that upsets other people who want to be known for that, who were not doing such as the kind of work that Whitney was. But Epstein, this was from December 4th, 2018. Epstein avoids trial. And just, the point is we're covering this like a lot of us were, but in depth and understanding the things that are now drifting through partisan conversation as we are with every story, doing our best to give you the facts. But the point what I'm making with this is this conversation, Acosta and Epstein, that a lot of people still grapple with. It was obvious then, it's obvious now. What Acosta said, I'll show you in a second. And the reality that this is a joint, I mean, it's kind of obvious to me, and this is my opinion, that it's Israel in control of a lot of what's happening. People dispute it back and forth, that they say it's U.S. and Israel's the one following along. You can decide for yourself. I think it's the former. But the point is to show you here that Acosta said both, right? Intelligence, and then later, insinuates, mentions more ways than one, CIA and Mossad. And I'll show you that. But here's also just the tag for Epstein to look at all the work we've done over the years talking about this. Here's even that one that Derek put out. I'm sorry. This was... That's crazy. I thought for some reason I was thinking Whitney put out. This is for TLAV, February 2nd, 2021. Biden's nominee for a new cabinet level science position is Epstein-linked geneticist, showing you that we're not about one party or the other, guy. I'm not about one party or the other, guys. We're about the facts. Always have been, which is what really irks some of these partisan screamers out there that tried to tell you we are black-pilled purity test maniacs. Now that everything's coming to pass the way we said it would or predicted, because we were looking at the facts as well, now there's another narrative. But let's talk about this. Axios, 22 hours ago. DOJ, FBI conclude Epstein had no client list, died by suicide, and of course that, if you believe this, that there was no blackmail involved. I mean, the first and most important, let's say this, the first point to make, arguably what's more important is up for you to decide. But first thing to think about, before we get into the actual, what's happening versus is that they said a lot of things, they being the government, both left and right, Biden's administration, now Trump's administration, that they're now, on full display, at least claiming. The reason I say that is because we have to ask whether they're lying with this, maybe this is AI video and all these different questions, but that they're displaying that they lied to you. Right? Either they made this up now, which shows you they're lying to you now, or they're saying, here's cameras that we told you weren't there, right? Or that no blackmail, no list. I mean, you've all said these things, whether Bondi said list, we'll go over that, or the idea that there's blackmail, which you've all said. And yet now the argument's different. Now they're all lockstep telling you we never said those things. Now we're trying to walk back what Bondi said. So you just have to be really honest with yourself, whatever side you think you're on, hopefully just the truth, that these people either lied to you then or lying to you now. There's really no other way to see this. But so that we can go, the article is really just bullet points, and I'll include we'll read the document for you real quick. But they're simply doing what a lot of us predicted, lying to you. That's what I think the evidence backs up. We'll go through it. Here is, as always, downloaded onto our server so you doesn't disappear somewhere. As part of our commitment, this is from U.S. Justice, the Department of Justice, FBI. As part of our commitment to transparency, pause for laughter, the Department of Justice and the Federal Bureau of Investigation have concluded an exhaustive review of investigative holdings related to Jeffrey Epstein. To ensure that the review was thorough, the FBI conducted digital searches of its databases, hard drives, and network drives, as well as physical searches of squad areas, locked cabinets, desks and closets and stuff, and other areas where responsive material may have been sorted. Now, am I crazy, or does that just sound like that's not true? Are we to believe that they just went through and searched every desk drawer in every building does that not sound dumb to you? They wanted it to sound like it was really exhaustive. Or maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they literally went to every single desk drawer and every single squad area and cabinet Every single one. I mean, do you realize how insane that sounds with what we're talking? And why would it be? I mean, you could simply just argue that they just wanted to sound thorough and they searched a lot of areas, but then included things that weren't true. What do you think about that? I just don't find it even plausible that they went and searched every desk drawer, even in every area that this might have been conducted in, because that sounds a little bit insane to me. And then that point is, why would there be Epstein files lingering in cabinets and desk drawers? It feels like they didn't think that through. I'm just going to put that out there. Then it went on to say, and hey, if we're seeing what Cash and Bongino have been doing, it's like everything else a part of this current administration. Noam and Bondi, these people seem like they're out of their depth, to say it very nicely. These searches uncovered a significant amount of material, including more than 300 gigabytes of data and physical evidence. Now, even that makes it sound like they somehow scooped it together from multiple sources. I just find that to be an odd way to look at that. The files relating to Epstein include a large volume of images of Epstein, images and videos of victims who are either minors or appear to be minors, and over 10,000 downloaded videos and images of illegal child sex abuse material and other pornography. Now, even that alone, there's not a single person, not an actionable thing in there to get somebody charged with a crime or arrested. Maybe it's all just camera forward. And even that, though, it's like, I'm not saying anybody should have to look at this or prove, but I mean, we know this stuff exists. We don't need to see horrible things like this to prove that that's existing or that's what Epstein was involved in. But they keep making a lot of big claims, like Bondi, and saying all the things they were. Like, read the next paragraph and you'll get more what I'm saying. Teams of agents, analysts, attorneys, and privacy and civil liberties experts combed through the digital and documentary evidence with the aim of providing as much information as possible to the public while simultaneously protecting victims. That's really the argument, which everyone understands, for why some things don't get shown, because we got to protect the victims, which is true. But it's a gap where people that are usually dishonest can be dishonest. Now, it says much of the material is subject to court-ordered sealing. Only a fraction of this material would have been aired publicly had Epstein gone to trial. As the seal, even that, it's like they're already defensive. It's a weird way to write that. As the seal served only to protect victims and did not expose any additional third parties to allegations of illegal wrongdoing. Through this review, we found no basis to revisit the disclosure of those materials and will not permit the release of child pornography, which, again, no one's asking them to do that. But there's a lot of in-between things going on in there. The point is, with all of that we just read, are you to believe that there's not a single piece of evidence that shows you another person that, like, the claim that we'll get to the clientless point in a second, because they're kind of overlapping right here, which is that not a single person who allegedly, like, how do you know they're trafficking in sex then? How do you know they're doing anything with children? If we don't have a client, then there's nothing, the crimes aren't there. Other than just possession, right? Which is obviously a crime, but that's not what they're claiming. They claim they have more. Where are the clients then? Well, there's a lot of things that you think right there, what we've discussed, maybe because there are a lot of high-level clients, which is what this was. And they don't want to put them in jail, but they want this to go to bed. I mean, their point is, whatever it is in between all this, there's something not connecting. And I think we all recognize that. And it says, this systematic review revealed no incriminating client list. We'll come back to that. You mean despite Pam Bondi saying explicitly that was on her desk? They're trying to claim she meant something else, but she was asked point blank. We'll play you in a second. There was also, and by the way, she also said the same thing in an interview after that. In fact, 3 times really, but the 2 we'll show you today, which are undeniable. There was also no credible evidence found that Epstein blackmailed prominent individuals. I mean, that's got to be the most prominent claim in this whole thing that I think every one of them have made claims about. And it says, as part of his actions. The whole thing for me, that's the central issue. In regard to what the political issue is, who is being blackmailed and who's involved in that. And I think you know where we're going with that. We did not uncover evidence that could predicate an investigation against uncharged third parties. How about just a second party? Where is the third? Well, we're talking about Epstein here. Ghislaine Maxwell is arrested for what? What is this idea that there's something else involved that they're not showing you is really hard. You can't miss it right now. Consistent with prior disclosures, this review confirmed that Epstein harmed over 1,000 victims. I mean, even that right there. So are we just literally trying to make this about Epstein individually hurting every single person, which is not that outside? It's not impossible. But again, I'm not going to belabor the point. I just want it to be very clear. The idea that they keep telling you that there's something else there, people they're working with, and now they're putting a pin in this and claiming that's not the case. They really led a lot of people on in this movement as if there was going to be this bombshell, and now pulling it back. You should ask yourself whether that whole claim, even though they knew they wouldn't show you, what was that for? Why would they now make themselves look bad? Because they needed you looking somewhere else then. That's what I would argue. Each suffered unique trauma in regard to the 1,000 victims. Sensitive information relating to these victims is intertwined throughout the materials. This includes, I'll add one more thing. Thousands of victims, right? Many of those victims will testify that he was not the one doing stuff to them, that they're not the only one, that there were other people involved, which we've heard. And I'll show you a brief list of the people they have the names of in regard to, which in a way serves as its own list, to be honest, but it's about, they can't prove they're involved with crimes. They were just overlapping. It's kind of the same thing. But why aren't those people where the charges? These are coming from firsthand testimony. Each suffered unique trauma. Sensitive information relating to these victims is intertwined throughout the material. So that's how they're saying we can't show you anything because it's all intertwined. This includes specific details such as victim names, likeness, physical descriptions, places of birth, associates, employment history. One of our highest priorities is combating child exploitation and bringing justice to victims. Perpetuating unfounded theories about Epstein serves neither of those ends. Don't keep talking about this, is what they're saying. To that end, while we have labored to provide the public with maximum information regarding Epstein and ensured examination of any evidence in the government's possession, wink, wink, it is the determination of the Department of Justice and the Federal Bureau of Investigation that no further disclosure would be appropriate or warranted. After a thorough investigation, FBI investigators concluded that Epstein committed suicide in his cell at the Metropolitan Correctional Center in New York on August 10, 2019. This conclusion is consistent with previous findings, including the 2019 autopsy from the New York City office of the Chief Medical Examiner. Now, remember, I think the first and the main autopsy, the guy was very clear about the hyoid bone and the way that happened. His expert opinion is just not possible. They don't care about that. It's not even included in here. Or any number of the other obvious absurdities around how he's capable of killing himself in a place designed to stop you from killing yourself. We've gone over all of this. And it says, the November 2019 position of the U.S. Attorney's Office, for which they claim the same thing, that he killed himself, and the June 2023 conclusions of the DOJ. So all the government people involved claim that nothing happened. Don't look, nothing to see here. The conclusion that Epstein died by suicide is further supported by video footage. Here we go. Of the common area. The video that they've all told you up until now just didn't exist until, oops, yes, we have it now. And guess what? It just so happens to, they claim, disprove what you're claiming is possible, even though the video in no way does that. And in fact, we'll go over it. Not only does it open up a hell of a lot more questions, there's a gap, there's a minute that's just not there, that no one's really addressing except online. There's all sorts of, the idea that this is even proving anything, that it's not even looking directly where you'd think, or the idea, like we just told you, or the fact that James Lee says when he looked it up, the program said it was AI. It's just, the bottom line is, in no way does this resolve the situation. And I'll show you why. Just because they say it is, I think they're hoping that they can just say, this is everything you should want. Like some mind Jedi, and just all of a sudden the Republicans go, this is everything we ever wanted. I don't think it's not working. I'm seeing more Republicans right now screaming about this than anybody else. It says, the video footage they claim from the special housing unit where he was housed, that's what they're claiming proves that. And the DOJ Inspector General explained in 2023, anyone entering or attempting to enter the tier where Epstein's cell was located would have been captured by the footage. The FBI's independent review of the footage confirmed that from the time he was locked in his cell until the time he wasn't, that nobody entered. And this is from 10:40 p.m. to 6:30 a.m. the next day. During this review, the FBI enhanced the relevant footage by increasing its contrast, balancing the color, and improving its sharpness. So altered the video. That makes you feel comfortable. But here's Pam Bondi. We'll start with this. Just the basic thing that she said this. Now, good. It's you don't have to turn this into that means they're hiding the list. It's one of the obvious questions. It could simply just be that Bondi's a dishonest person, like they've been the entire time. Noam and Bondi and Trump and all of them, no different than the left. They're here because they want power, and they're here to lie to you about what they're doing. No, he's MS-13 rapist, terrorist, murderer. Oh, not at all, but let's just keep pretending that. Or any number of other things they've lied about. You could go down the entire list. So maybe she just said this because that's what she thought you wanted to hear. I don't think that. I think there's more to it, but it's important that we're objective, and we ask, I want to point out that these people would lie about anything. That's obviously important to this conversation.
Saw your appearance at CPAC with Ben and with Ted Cruz. And one of the things that you alluded to, and this is something Donald Trump has talked about, the DOJ may be releasing the list of Jeffrey Epstein's clients. Will that really happen?
Jeffrey Epstein's client, the list. He didn't ask about anything else. May be releasing the list of clients. Here's a response.
It's sitting on my desk right now to review.
No, yeah, I mean, you could argue she just meant the entire file, but that's not really what she said and not really what he asked. So that you can't really, you have to be, if you're honest, she very well could have meant the list right there.
That's been a directive by President.
And most likely did because of the question.
Trump. I'm reviewing that. I'm reviewing JFK files, MLK files. That's all in the process of being reviewed because.
Also, she said more than once about this massive trove she was going through of all these different things. And then after that came out and said, what video? There's no video in regard to, and she has gone back and forth more than once. Again, Republicans are calling this stuff out. So here, that's the first part. Oh, and here's the article. This one's from February 27th, where it says, oh, I had it right here. I didn't take a picture. It's right here. Saying Bondi was asked during a broadcast, the Department of Justice may be releasing the list of Epstein clients. I guess this is just the same reporting of it. It's sitting on my desk right now to review. The point is there's at least 3 examples that you can find where she was discussing this in that kind of context. But none of them are, I mean, it's hard not to call that explicit. It's exactly what's being asked. But here is the response of Leave It about this today in regard to the list and whether she was asked that. And, it's the answer you expect. This is Primo Radical simply says this is the most repugnant, low IQ, non-answer, and deflection possible. Is anyone falling for this?
The FBI looks at the circumstances surrounding the death of Jeffrey Epstein. According to the report, this systematic review revealed no incriminating client list. So what happened to the Epstein client list that the Attorney General said she had on her desk?
Well, see, even he's asking it exactly like that. Now, again, it looks like this video is getting all wonky for me for some reason. It's the way the world is going to be for us, and hopefully not. I mean, the technocratic post world we're living in. But I'm trying to hopefully pause it. It'll get back on track. But forgive me for having it be out of sync. It's really not up to me these days. But so the point was that Ducey is his name, right? He asked it exactly like that because. Why would you assume otherwise? It's exactly what she was asked.
Client list. So what happened to the Epstein client list that the Attorney General said she had on her desk?
Well, I think if you go back and look at what the Attorney General said in that interview, which was on your network on Fox News. Go ahead.
John Roberts said, DOJ may be releasing the list of Jeffrey Epstein's clients. Will that really happen? And she said, it's sitting on my desk right now to review.
Yes, she was saying the entirety of all of the paperwork, all of the paper in relation to Jeffrey Epstein's crimes. That's what the Attorney General was referring to, and I'll let her speak for that. But again, when it comes to the FBI and the Department of Justice, they are more than committed to ensuring that bad people are put behind.
And we're so great, and we fight crime, and we're the best, and we fight for you, and we'll always tell the truth, and blah, 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 whatever, everything. And whenever they get into that, it's not that it's not that it's always false, but it's just what they want you to think. It's just so funny that that's not what he asked. The idea that they have to regurgitate the narrative around it all is just it's just tired. We all, everyone tunes out when that happens. But obviously, that's not what anybody thought. Now we got the video. Okay, so let's go through this information. We're not going to. It's what 10 hours long. We're not going to go through it all. But I will show you right out of the gate the one thing that I think is, being called out across the board, but very conspicuous. Note down here, it is at 11:58:54. Hopefully that goes away in time. I think it's just, you'll see it skip right before it goes to 12. Watch that. 58, 59. Boop. See that? See that little jump right there? That's a cut, guys. There's no way around that. I can see it's hard. It's so long. You have to get it right. There we go. So I'll pull it off for a second. So what you'll see is it goes from, and I will have to wait the whole time, but it's from 11:58. It comes down to the end, and it just kind of blips out. And you have to realize there's a whole minute right there. We're talking about a minute, which is more than enough for something to happen. So think about how insane that is to put out this very long thing, 12 hours, I guess, or 10 hours, whatever it is. And I mean, it's right here. It's actually 10 hours and 52 minutes to put this out, claiming this it puts it to bed. And then there's an undeniable gap of a minute missing in the conversation. Is that not the most stupid thing in the world? I mean, how everyone, you don't think obviously they would address that, right? If it was something that there was a minute right there, but that will explain why, because obviously we're going to call it out. Might as well play it again. We're here. 54, 55, 56, 57, 11:58, 59, boom, 12. A whole minute goes away. That's just ridiculous, guys. So, or either they wanted there to be this unspoken or this, this question, right? This overhanging thing that maybe they did it right there, or they're trying to hide it from you, or they're trying to hide something right there. I just don't know how else to view this. Now here, Adam Cochran, who I started following because of this, I wasn't familiar with before, does a really great breakdown of all this. Now, even right now, I'm thinking like, God, I really don't want to spend an hour talking about this conversation, but it's interesting. And it's definitely just mostly because it shows you and hopefully reaches people that need to hear it more than anybody, that this administration is no different than the other, that they're all part of the same problem. So Adam Cochran, he says, well, I'm finally now on Team Epstein didn't kill himself after the mistakes they made in this release. Let's break it down. One, this 10-hour video does not show Epstein's cell. And what you're going to see here, and I can just bring this back up, as I understand it, it's right. Oh, and here, actually, he's got the map right here. So it doesn't show his cell. What it shows is this view from outside and around. So there's the camera you're looking at, right? That's the camera. The view they're showing you. What apparently the view is around the shot from it. So it's not even. So all you get is like this corner shot, like right here or right there by the stairs. So he says it's across the entire hall from the Epstein section, which is broken down. I mean, so I guess what their argument would be, if pushed, and it's just my opinion, is that that's, this is the one that they found. The one over there was broken. That's why we didn't get to see right by his door. But this one we later realized was, and it took you years to tell us that. But the point is, it still does not prove. Like I said, if it doesn't show even if it did show that whatever they said was happening, we would question whether they made it up, which is we'll get to in a second with James Lee and the AI discussion. But now they give you something that doesn't even fully show you like the real time frame, or like what in and out, or like showing him in the room hanging himself would be even then we should question it. But that's the kind of thing would be like, okay, clearly there it is. He killed himself. Without showing that, for all we know, somebody put something in there. Somebody did something to him while he was in there. Somebody snuck, before, was in there the whole time, and they came out afterward, or that they were involved. It's not that far outside their own possibility with all that we've seen. Everyone off duty, sleeping, or suddenly the cameras all don't work, and all these like the 17 different things that show you something went down. So this does not put this to bed, and you'll see why. Here's the breaking down one post. He says only a tiny sliver of staircase leading to Epstein's wing can be seen. This is why they argue it proves no one approached his cell that night, despite it being almost entirely out of frame. Stairway to L tier, it says in the second image, is what leads to his block. Oh, there's a better one for the whole thing right here. So there's a good overview. Take a screenshot. There's the kind of breakdown of the space, and each one of these represents little stairs going up. Now it says in each of the tier is 8 cells with up to 2 inmates. Epstein is L tier in view of the guards, which is where the circles are. See right here, like that's where the guards are, who is directly diagonal to the camera. It says the first red flag is that this footage exists at all, right? Which we've all picked up on, because we know I shouldn't say we know. My point is they claimed that from OIG report that most cameras were not recording that day, which makes no sense to me, except for the one in the stairway, and this camera. But we frequently had conflicting stories about which footage still exists. To suddenly have 10 hours released is not just odd, it's ridiculous. We've been told there is no footage, it was out, and now it is. Just how anybody takes that at face value is beyond me, but they do exist. And you know who they are out there, either trying to pretend like this puts it to bed, which is embarrassing, or like, oh, it's not that important. Epstein's, it's a story, but it's not the most focus on, those kind of people. But it says the first red flag. Oh, it goes on to say, but we frequently had, that's the one we just talked about. And it goes on to say multiple entrances. As I watched the video, I noticed, this is him speaking, multiple people enter from the right-hand side of the lower level. As it turns out, door 46 leads to floor 10. He says both the primary and secondary, the special housing unit 9 entrances are on the lower level on the right-hand side. And here's the map again, demonstrating what he's talking about. And it says, this means it's easy to enter and go up the staircase to L tier, keeping to the right of the staircase and not be seen. So even then, there's the idea being that this is no way putting an end to this at all, that there's ways around that, let alone the video barely even showing you what they claim it does. For example, it says, here's a screenshot for the podcast. I'm going through the screenshots on this thread. She has a screenshot we'll talk about later of 2 people rushing up the stairs, and you can still barely see them. Lockdown time. The next oddity is the lockdown time, according to the official report. All inmates were locked in their cells around 8 p.m., which my opinion is we can never trust these official reports, but that becomes a problem when they've got inmates visible on camera at 8:23. See if we can do it quickly. It's hard to get this date exact, the time, because it's so long. Right here. Ooh, went too far. There. So right there. See them going up and down the stairs? In the back, if you look all the way in the back, there's one person going up, and you'll see a couple people in orange. There we go. 55. And you see, ask yourself how they think this dispels anything. That this far away, this corner shot, it just doesn't make any sense. It's, gosh, it's like 30s. Oh, there, right there. See, there you go. Okay. Showing them in the pictures. And he goes, that becomes a whole problem. Stupid platform. That becomes a whole problem when we've got inmates visible on camera at 8:23. Persons unknown. It says we then have a series of people move through the building that are not recorded on their reports, which is not supposed to happen in such a secure location. Somebody then either removed them or they weren't being identified when they were there in the first place. Very suspicious with what we know was happening here. The first 2 are likely non-suspicious in this person's opinion, but oddly not covered in interaction reports. That's more than odd. It's highly suspicious. And it says the first odd one takes place at 17:28. Then a Blackmail CO retrieves a paper that was slipped under door 46. At first, I assumed this was material handler Thomas from the reports, but he didn't start his shift until midnight. So he says, I assume this may be evening watch officer in charge who is unnamed in the report. Also strange. This may be standard comms protocol, but the fact it wasn't outlined in the report, which documented all their procedures, is odd. And it says the next oddity is the man who leaves through door 46 at midnight. Unlike everyone else who carefully closes the security door, he flung it wide open, left it open, and had to return to close it. Which, I mean, see, like that kind of thing, it leaves opening for something to accidentally make its way through. Given the inexperience and timestamp, this could be material handler Thomas. He goes, next up, I call Hatman. Hatman seems to do laundry service. He throws the old linen bags out into the hall and brings new ones in, but there's a problem. Hatman doesn't leave, then the linens linens and go back out the door. He pushes the empty garbage can a bit to the right, obstructing the view of downstairs. Then he walks down to the lower level with a fresh linens and out the view to the right-hand side. This is the first time in the video we see, A, someone could exit from the lower level as Hatman isn't seen again, or B, you can reach the L tier stairs out of view, simply showing you that none of this proves anything. But also keep the orange linens in mind, is coming back to that. Lastly, we've got these two characters unknown. The first one, someone collecting reports, but the second person wearing a black hoodie with their hood up, who leaves for 20 minutes and returns at between 5:38, 5:50 a.m. with no record. That's 40 minutes before they come and find allegedly Epstein killed himself. When did Epstein get locked down? It says the next is the problem of when Epstein was in his cell. The initial report tells us that he was allowed to make an unscheduled phone call at 7 p.m., which lasted until 7:19, and he walked back to his cell. Who did he talk to? Interesting timing of all of that. What orders were given? What happened? Was he threatened? Was he blackmailed? You know, all these things matter. I mean, one of the possibilities is that somebody gave him something that gave him the ability to do that and said, do it or we're going to do something else. All these are up in the air. And the idea that we just put it to bed and killed himself, it's just, even that right there could mean, yes, maybe he did that, but who drove that to reality? Who gave the materials to allow that to happen? It's clear this is a cover-up. That's my opinion. I think the evidence more than backs that up. However, later that same report said he was housed between 10:40 p.m. and 6:30 a.m. when he was found, but not if he was able to come out and make a phone call and talk to somebody. At that time kept coming, and that time kept coming up. In another statement, they said no one checked on him since 10:40 p.m. It says, he's including the screenshots of the document, which is below. But it was today's FBI press release that I think made the big mistake. It said Epstein was locked in his cell at around 10:40 p.m., which was weird because all inmates were supposedly locked down and sometime just after 8 p.m. with no record of other treatment. So he says, in fact, the original release statement claimed that in the video, the reason we started at 7:40 is because this gray-haired man is supposedly Epstein being walked to his cell. So what happened at 10:40 p.m.? Simple point is inconsistency. Maybe it's a mistake. Certainly could be. But we all know that it could be something else too, which is covering up the timing of all of this. What happened in that time frame? Who did he talk to? It says, what happens at 10:40 p.m.? It's incredibly hard to see, but if you look at the frames one by one, then you'll see 10:39:40, empty stairs, 10:39:42, an orange blur on the left of the L tier stairs, 10:39:46, a more visible orange sleeve at the top of the stairs. So let's look, 10:39:40. Let's see, 10:39. So I think we just missed that first one. Shoot, it's so hard to get close. We'll do there and we'll reflect on this. So the point is that counts down 10:39:40. So empty stairs, but then at 10:39:42, an orange blur, the left side of the stairs. Oh, it's going to be a while. Damn it. Well, you guys get, I like to give you guys, the illustrative. He's got the images right here, and we've got the video for you to watch after the fact, but just, as always, good to do it live if we can. 10:39:42. That's going to take too long. It's a whole minute. If I try to move it, it's going to take too far. But so as you can see here, there, the orange that flashes by, maybe I'll jump back if we can catch it on time. 39:42. Okay, about a minute from now. But so continuing, he says, so at 10:39, for reasons unknown, undocumented and suppressed, Epstein was out of his cell, at least by the information that we have based on what they're claiming. But again, it could simply be they're lying or it could be a mistake. Consider that. Let's, don't use their cover story as absolute fact either, right? They could be lying about any number of these things. 38:46. How'd that pause? It seems like it stopped. Oh, it does stop. Damn it. It stops playing when I jump away. That's stupid. Oh, well, but it says, for reasons unknown, and then it goes, despite every statement claiming he had been locked down for hours. The initial OIG report claims officers checked on him in his cell at that time, which was a lie. Yeah, it's weird. Let me do this, actually. I think I can pull it off. I just pulled it off the thread and see if that will keep going, even if I'm away from it. Sorry, experimenting as we go. There we go. Nice. Okay, I'll let it count down in the background. All right, so it says the guard station that the officer sat at was close to Epstein's cell so that the guards could carefully monitor him. In fact, it was the only cell where guards had direct line of sight and could have easily heard movement in. And this is something we talked about well before. The idea that they weren't able to see this or what, I forget what they said, what they were either on break or they were sleeping. I think it was sleeping is what they said. But there's inconsistency even in those reports. There we go. So 39:40, right there. Right? See the orange right there? Definitely there. So, I mean, guys, there's something going on here. I actually can't believe that they put this out with how many open holes are in this, how many inconsistencies, how many new questions it brings up. I find that really interesting. So he says, despite this, the guards claim to have not done their rounds or checked on him and to have fallen asleep at their desks for hours. One problem, though, There isn't any multi-hour span in which they weren't seen walking around on camera. See, it's like they didn't either think this through or somebody wants this to be exposed. That's certainly possible. But here, enter the Q conversation where it's going to be somehow this is their secret plan to expose the crime and that they're trapping them and it just never seems to come to pass, which only works if you pretend there's one good guy side in the broken dynamic of our government, which clearly does not seem to be the case. But that's wild, right? That they can claim they missed it because they were sleeping, but you can see because of the video that they were doing their rounds, and that's not the case. There was not a long enough period. Now it says finding Epstein. They found Epstein at 6:30 a.m., as we're told, and when they've delivered food. The food delivery makes it upstairs to the cell without ever appearing on camera, showing how useless this angle is. Or they lied about that, which I'd imagine they bring food that seems normal, right? But it just simply either shows you that you can't see everything or that they would just lie about what happened then. They found him at 6:30. It says they find Epstein hung, in quotes, I would add, using an excessive amount of linens. But as far as and I reported this from their own information, we're told that these sheets are designed to where they're not even strong enough to be able to withhold that they would tear because you're in a cell designed to not allow you to kill yourself. Now it says, note how he didn't use, this is from their report, guys. This is really interesting. I hadn't seen this. Note how he didn't use the electrical wire from the 2 CPAP machines in his room, which makes no sense at all. But instead, apparently, this small single strip of cloth that we were told isn't capable of doing that, but to hang himself, but also didn't even knock over the bottle that was sitting there. It's so obvious we're being lied to. And perhaps most curious of all, when crime scene photos from the OIG were taken in a prison that's known for its disrepair, nearly all the railings were painted black, except for the J tier. But in the video, the L tier, the railing is unpainted. What do you know about that? Suggesting either the camera is not positioned where the report claims, or what I'm leaning toward, the crime scene photos were taken at the different time. For some reason, I mean, or to cover up, maybe in that scene, that image, there's something much more relevant that shows you something you're not supposed to see. So they used an old image. I mean, there's any number of things to possibly think. While doing a high murder profile case in a prison that is set to be shut down, they painted the railings. But in this photo, the railing is not. So clearly they either took an old photo or that's the only way I could think that makes sense. It's old, which would be covering up something that was in the new scene. It's so many inconsistencies. Now it says, no matter what you make of that, here is what we know. The FBI claimed no one was approaching a cell block, and that's wrong. 5 or 6 people visibly were near those stairs that night and could have went up without being on camera, as he clearly demonstrated. Both entrances to that cell block were out of view and could access those stairs. There are multiple conflicting times in which Epstein was supposedly locked down for the night. For some unknown reason, a prisoner, likely Epstein, is out of his cell at 10:40 with no record. The officers doing rounds claim to fall asleep at their desks for hours. But with people coming and going and then walking around, we know it's not true. Epstein had an unreasonable amount of linens in his room, but reports from the day say he had the room checked and cleared. Fresh linen, which is it kind of conflicts with the other things, but one possible point leaning towards somebody, forced him, told him to, right? Gave him that you're going to be disgraced or we're going to do something to your family. I mean, who knows what could drive someone like that to do it, but that would lean in that direction. And it says fresh linens were brought into the special housing unit that night by Hatman. So what was in those special linens, right? No prisoners claimed to hear commotion. Yet Epstein supposedly hung himself on a single shred of linen so low on the bed frame that he strangled himself only an inch off the ground, and yet didn't knock over the pill bottle. And on top of that, experts will tell you it's very unlikely, implausible that somebody's even able to kill themselves because of just, you have to lean. It's the same thing with like the Anthony Bourdain conversation on a doorknob with it doesn't make much sense. I guess the argument is unless they were just determined to kill themselves, but it doesn't line up. Now it says most of the cameras in that area failed that night and footage was supposedly lost, but now we have it. For some reason, Officer Tova specifically looks at the one working camera on at least 3 occasions that night. Even before you get into the inconsistencies with claims that he did or did not have a list, or the fact that experts dispute that hanging with linen would result in the kind of breaks found in the autopsy, I think the hyoid bone, it seems pretty damn clear. Epstein didn't kill himself. The victims deserve truth, honesty, and justice, and they don't get that if powerful people sell this lie. Well said. Well said. And he goes, I should also add, I'm happy and well adjusted and plan to be tweeting for a long time to come. Right? Let's all say it together. You know, Ryan's not, I am not suicidal. It's the same thing he's doing right there. He said, if I suddenly disappear or fall out a window or something, and we know that I really nailed this thread. Oh, he adds something at the end here. I don't think I saw this. He says, another damning moment of the footage that I had missed in first. It's been cut. Oh, that was the point we went over. Yeah. So that's the blip in all of it. So it's funny how that's one of the most important points. And yet everything he already showed you is more than enough to show you that we're being lied to. I think anyway. It's very wild. Now, as Grace rightly points out, very gracefully, literally one of the first things reported was the cameras were down. It's just how stupid this gets, right? And they think you're going to fall for it. James Lee posted this out, and you can do it for yourself. I mean, what I get is inconsistency, which is just the way these things are today. But most of them seem to suggest that, but you get the ones that say not. His point was, I posted the video on FBI, posted the video the FBI released as evidence that Jeffrey Epstein committed suicide on TikTok, and the app immediately flagged it as AI generated. That's just special in and of itself. I find that ridiculous. Now, the point about Acosta, I think, is very relevant to this conversation. And this is just one of the many, but you know what's funny? I had a video of this that for some reason I can't find now. Not suggesting any foul play, just that I'm frustrated that we had the video where he literally stood there. I think it was a Donald Trump press conference. And he said exactly this, for those that might not believe it, but I personally saw this, but you can look it up for yourself. He says, I was told Epstein belonged to intelligence and to leave it alone. So isn't this shockingly relevant to what's going on? The bigger part of this says, is the Epstein case going to be a problem for confirmation hearings? Acosta had been asked, right? Because he was going to work with Trump's administration. Acosta had explained breezily, they write, apparently, that back in the day, he just had one meeting on the Epstein case. One. He says, and this is directly from the article, he cut the non-prosecution deal with one of Epstein's attorneys, which is insane that even happened, a non-prosecution for the guy that they knew was guilty. And it says, and remember people that would say, we all knew what he was doing. It's obvious. But it says they've cut the non-prosecution deal with one of his lawyers, Epstein's lawyers, because he had, quote, been told to back off, that Epstein was above his pay grade. Quote, I was told Epstein belonged to intelligence and to leave it alone. He told his interviewers in the Trump administration, who evidently thought that was sufficient answer and went ahead and hired him. Well, that only really makes sense when you understand, in my opinion, the Israel infiltration and all of this. How are you going to let someone work in your administration who has an answer like that? I guess I got to take it one more way, because he knows he'll follow orders, even if he's lying, which is something they clearly want in this government. But guys, the idea that we know this, more than just this, though, because of many other examples, because of Ehud Barak, or these there's been so many different examples of people admitting this overlap. And so that has to ring true with what we're seeing today, or we'll understand why they would lie about it. And I think it's more than not right now because of the Israel connection and what they're doing with this. But they would just as likely cover up for a CIA operative, which I argue it's both. I think that's very clear in the information. Now, Carrie Wedler adds to this. She says, I don't feel the need to do the I told you so dance about Epstein betrayal, but I will say I'm glad I didn't allow myself to be gaslit into believing a bunch of ruling class politicians, propagandists, and authoritarians that they cared about exposing ruling class politicians, propagandists, and authoritarians. Well put, as always. Now, Derek adds to this and says, 1 year ago, Trump said he likely would not release the Epstein files. Promises made, promises kept.
People think that one way to build trust is to declassify things that everyone's talking about. I know you just talked earlier about, I don't want to be a conspiracy theorist. So if you were president, would you declassify, you can answer yes or no to these. Would you declassify the 9/11 files?
Yeah.
Would you declassify JFK files?
Yeah.
Would you,
I did a lot of it.
Would you declassify the Epstein files?
Yeah, I would.
All right.
I guess I would. I think that less so because, you don't know it. You don't want to affect people's lives if it's phony stuff in there, because there's a lot of phony stuff with that whole world.
Oh, wow. That's not a very convincing answer, is it? Is that what 99% of his base thinks?
But I think I would, or at least...
Do you think that would restore trust? help restore trust?
Yeah, I don't know about Epstein so much as I do the others. Certainly about the way he died. It would be interesting to find out what happened there, because that was
covered up.
A weird situation, and the cameras didn't happen to be working, et cetera, et cetera.
So here's what's interesting. Just like we always point out, now you could argue that something changed and now he sees the truth and he didn't know then, blah, 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 which is certainly possible. But recognize, guys, in my opinion, that they're all involved with the lie, left and right, that he said this at the time, even though he very clearly suggested not, he gave you the bone. We want to find out whether he killed himself because we're interested, because he knew that was the thing. That was the Epstein didn't kill himself, right? They tap into the memes. They say what you, I mean, even though he already said probably not, he gives you the thing that makes you go wink, wink. He secretly is going to, and he doesn't want them to know he's going to. They know how to play you. They know exactly what the lowest common denominator wants. So consider that today with what's going on with or when Trump runs in the first place and says 9/11, lock her up, the Fed, and none of this even gets discussed in his administration. He tapped into what he knew was the majority, and they still do. I think that's very important.
But yeah, I'd go a long way toward that one. The other stuff I would definitely do the January 6th because, beyond all of them.
Well, that's very revealing. And this was just his post on June 5th saying Trump expresses doubt about releasing them. Oh, good on him for calling that out. Now, of course, here's another angle. Here's libs of TikTok saying, Trump says he'll release the Epstein client list if elected. The Democrat elites are shaking right now. Funny how well these things age these days. But of course, they're never going to pull. They're going to keep running with whatever. They're the team right now, somehow trying to gaslight you into thinking that what happened is good and that it's all over and it was never that big in the first place. Right? These people who want you to believe it's all about the Democrat deep state pedophiles, which there's some level of truth to that, and it goes across both parties. The idea that now, after there are no Democrats being arrested, that they would act like this all is put to bed. It's pretty damn embarrassing. And as Michael Tracy says, 2024 was a masterful innovation in GOP campaign propaganda, leveraging ascendant alt media into a hugely potent asset. Imagine telling these podcasters last fall that by July 2025, Trump would bomb Iran, terminate the Epstein files, and become bitter political enemies with Musk. That is wild. Here's what this clip says.
But a lot of big people went to that island.
Like you.
But fortunately, I was not one of them.
It's just very strange for a lot of people that the list of clients that went to the island has not been made public.
Yeah, it's very interesting, isn't it?
Look at the way he's even speaking, by the way. Personal opinion, completely my opinion. He's got a very weird look and feel to him right now. Like it's, I don't know, just the way he's talking. Like, you know, I get the sense of dishonesty. My opinion.
Interesting, isn't it? Probably will be, by the way. Probably.
So if you're able to, you'll be.
Yeah, I'd certainly take a look at it. Now, Kennedy's
and there's that. See how this works? It's the same every time. So I'll take a look at it and claim he's going to do it. The Democrats are they're terrified. And all he really did was give you right down the middle non-answer. And they know their marching orders. How embarrassing for them. But these people aren't even seemingly capable of recognizing how stupid they look, or maybe they just don't care.
Interesting because it's so many years ago. You know, they do that for danger too, because, you know, endangers certain people, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. Already making it clear, even in this video, that she tells you is for sure that he's kind of not going to do it.
So Kennedy is very different from the Epstein thing.
He didn't even ask about Kennedy, did he?
But yeah, I'd be inclined to do the Epstein. I'd have no problem with it.
See, that's not an answer. I'll look at it. I'd be inclined to. Oh, yeah, but that's and now. But the point is, down the middle. It's an art form. He does it pretty well, to be honest. But it only really works when you've got blind sycophants that will cheer on whatever they want to believe you might have said. Trump says he'll release them. No, he didn't. And the Epstein elites, or the Democrat elites, are shaking right now. Well, Jack Posobiec comes out and says, I see the libs are up to their old talking point. So whenever there's something that's not working for the partisan game on either side, they shove out their maniac, their screamers to come out and say, the liberals, I can't talk, Democrats and liberals, they're the ones. They did something stupid. Everybody point at the other side because it's the only thing that works still, right? For the people that need to just go the other side, they're the bad guys. No matter how bad our thing is, they're worse. So we can ignore it right now. It's sad. It's childish. It's paternalism at the end of the day. He says, I see the libs are up to their own talking points, so I have to post us again. If Trump was in the Epstein files, why would Biden and Garland have released it? Why wouldn't they have released it? Gee, that's a Gordian knot. I mean, maybe because partisanship's an illusion, Jack. But you know this, it's your whole shtick. And I put out an old meme that we had from TLAV back in the day. Don't get caught up in picking sides. Get educated and research issues. The more people play favorites and stay loyal to their team, the more the deep state will continue to volley society back and forth through illusory partisan politics. Right? Look how consistent we've been with our principles. That's like 2016 we made that. The bottom line, guys, he knows the answer. That doesn't mean that is the truth, but clearly there's an answer to your question. If and why? Well, because the partisans, an illusion. They're all on the same team because they're all on the list. I mean, there's so many possible things, but he just wants to float it like it's somehow this sage wisdom. Clearly, we know it's only the deep state Democrat pedophiles. Lazy, guys. Jack Posobiec is in and of himself, stems from Israeli, Freudian slip or just a slip, but the intelligence, right? These people know what they're doing. Now, that doesn't have to mean that you're on some operation, but the guy knows how to play people using operations, and the guy is very actively pro-Trump no matter what all the time, like all of them are. How do you trust someone like that? When you can, like a cat turd that says, I'll never defy Trump, I'm always on Trump's side. Well, okay, then you're literally telling us that you'll lie for him, you'll do whatever he says, you'll cheer it on even if it's bad. Yeah, we've all seen that. So how can you even take someone like that seriously? Well, Charlie Kirk, making that point, says, if Trump was on the Epstein list, why didn't Biden release that info and stop him from being president? Well, almost like they've all gotten the same talking point, right? Maybe because they're all on the list, Charlie. It's just lazy. Here is a clip from Catherine Austin Fitts giving you her opinion whether Trump is on these files.
Trump's Epstein file is bigger than the Encyclopedia Britannica is the way I would describe it. So you being from the Netherlands might not know the Encyclopedia Britannica, but it's a huge, when we were kids, we had a, like 25 volume Encyclopedia Britannica. So, yeah. So he and Epstein were best friends.
Trump.
Yeah.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, for a long time.
Well, you can see the pictures everywhere.
Well, the one I love is, so Epstein was basically part of the Les Wexner operation, and Wexner bought him a house on East 71st Street. So I used to live, I had an apartment on East 64th when I first got to New York. So it was my neighborhood. Anyway, so he bought him a house on East 71st Street. And then after a relatively short time, he moved him next door to a much bigger house, which is the one you always see in the pictures of Epstein's house. The first house he sold to Howard Lutnick, who's the Secretary of Commerce and co-chairman of the transition team, right? So Lutnick for many years was Epstein's next door neighbor, which to me intuitively makes a lot of sense because Epstein was primarily a money laundering network, in my opinion. And so having a primary dealer, there are only 24 primary dealers in the New York Fed. And so having a primary dealer who's running the market in Treasury securities is a logical person to put next door. I'm assuming Wexner probably had tunnels built underneath. So anyway, the whole administration is full of Epstein people. So
now I imagine she was making a joke right there, but joke but not kind of thing. But in regard to the tunnels, by the way, but the thing is just so, there's so many connections, right? I again will recommend Whitney's work around not just the Epstein point as it relates to this discussion, but like the deeper eugenicist, transhumanist, technocratic overlap of what he was working on in regard to the eugenics aspect of like seeding his seed to the world. Epstein had this really weird, wanting to populate the world with his children, or the idea of the technocratic Harvard overlap and the work being done there in that direction. But, the point is with Lutnick and the rest, you have to really consider how this played a role, not just with Israel and blackmail or the CIA and sexual blackmail, but the bigger picture of what was being driven in, like what we're dealing with today and how it does interconnect. Lutnick is an obvious example of that, but it's a lot more than just Lutnick. The fact that he was next door neighbor is just, you got to really start piecing these things together and see that this is not all coincidence. These people are here in these positions for a reason, guys. Here is Midas Touch simply pointing out some of the different compilations of Trump and Epstein. There are a lot of them. Again, my point is not to say that you could, question everything. Maybe he's telling the truth, but realize if the same thing, if this was Biden or anybody, a nameless Democrat that had the same amount of overlap, you know what these people would be saying. Libs of TikTok would say there's no 100% guilty. We know for sure. And the same question. If you're objective, you wouldn't say that in either case. But you know as well as I that there's a lot of evidence that back this up. And, people like Catherine, their opinion matters. I think they have a lot of weight. But the evidence, I think, speaks for itself.
That Jeffrey Epstein was running a sex trafficking ring in the early 2000s that included underage girls as young as 14 years old.
Donald Trump in 2002 said of Epstein, he's a lot of fun to be with. It's even said that he likes beautiful women as much as I do, and many of them are on the younger side.
He routinely spoke fawningly of Jeffrey. He admired Epstein's lifestyle.
Your daughter, she's beautiful. Can I say this? A piece of
She's actually always been very voluptuous.
What does Tiffany have of Marlon's?
She's got Marla's legs. We don't know whether or not she's got this part yet.
You were playing tennis and you came off the court. Quote, look at that piece of I would love some of that. It so happened that Trump was referring to Cohen's then 15-year-old daughter, Samantha.
I had the impression that he was interested in younger women and that, women would age out for him.
Miss Teen Universe? Yeah, that's like giving Jeffrey Dahmer a cooking show.
I'll go backstage before a show, and everyone's getting dressed and ready and everything else. And I'm allowed to go in because I'm the owner of the pageant, and therefore I'm inspecting it. I standing there with notes like...
Donald Trump is heard making questionable comments about a young girl.
You going up the escalator? I'm going to be dating her in 10 years.
A lawsuit against the presumptive GOP nominee alleges he raped a girl when she was 13 years old.
Prince Andrew answering questions for the first time about his friendship with convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein.
I don't know Prince Andrew, but it's a tough story.
Trump has been photographed with Prince Andrew as far back as the year 2000.
Ghislaine Maxwell is accused of helping Epstein sexually abuse underage girls.
I've met her numerous times over the years, especially since I lived in Palm Beach, and I guess they lived in Palm Beach. But I wish her well.
You know about sexual predators and things like that. I mean,
you are one.
All right, I was going to say that, but it's true.
Now, obviously, to be objective, the simple point to make, whether true or not, is that you know as well as I that people would lie about that for their own benefit, right? Whether Democrat, Republican, or just people that don't like him, people that want power or money. The obvious point is it's possible that could have been an association, but nothing more, and that people want to lie about that. This is what you're going to get the argument from. The Trump derangement, the Democrats hate him, he's trying to save the country, and they want to start whatever it is. Certainly possible. Consider all of that. But also consider the evidence and consider that there's not much on the other side of that to argue against why that's happening other than, they just would like to do that to hurt him, which sure matters. But I think the evidence also matters more. And I think what we can see is if, outside of like tangible, provable, you're going to prison evidence, every other conversation they have about these types of overlaps or any number of overlaps with this kind of conversation, far less evidence is enough to, in the court of public opinion, the same people would go after people relentlessly. Now, that point is never made to say that that's why we should say he's guilty. It's simply meant to show you the hypocrisy of people that will go after one and not the other, which is just opening the door. Basically, that's meant to make you, make sure you see those arguments of why you should ignore it in the right light and look at the evidence and come to your own conclusions about what that shows you. Here's what Trump put out today. I just think it's relevant to think about what he's saying while this is all happening, right? So, let's be clear again. The amount of Republicans who are like seething about this right now, it's wild. It's overtaking Twitter and every other conversation that I can see. He put this out today. The FBI, under the direction of Cash and Bongino, is back to the basics. Locking up criminals, clearing up American streets, I guess after this long investigation of Epstein, right? We have the greatest law enforcement professionals in the world, but politics, in quotes, and corrupt leaders often prevent them from doing their job. That is no longer the case, and now they have been unleashed to do their jobs, and they're doing it just that. Keep it up, make America safe again. Right, so what this is meant to be is a not-so-subtle direction point, talking or, marching orders. That's where you should be looking, right? Let's pretend like that's now done. We're looking forward to the future. Make it all great again. Stop focusing on the nuance and the details. That's how I read that. Funny. I respond, Hong Kong with Clown World down at the bottom. Because that's what Orwell and I were talking about that. And the point being, though, this is like tone deaf to what is happening in the conversation right now. And I didn't see anything else about it. So we get people like this who see the direction like they do, and they dutifully follow it like the sycophants do. I'm not saying we need to move on from Epstein, says Insurrection Barbie. I want to see accountability for everything. What I'm saying is that Epstein is not the end-all, be-all defining moment of the Trump presidency like people on here are making it out to be. So you can sell you some more rage and make money. Wow. It's not the reason why I support Trump or support President Trump. I would support or not support Trump. It's important, but so is 100,000 other things. What I am saying is that perspective, nuance, patience, and common sense need to make a comeback fast. Can you imagine that? Think about what they've been saying this whole time. And that's your response to people now going, but now it didn't. What you kept telling us was going to be the bombshell didn't happen. And so now you're chastising people for making too much out of it. I mean, how is that just not the most embarrassingly desperate thing you've ever seen? But they keep doing this. All of them, all the people we talk about on these screaming partisan level. It's embarrassing. I mean, here's people below saying, glad to see you're totally fine with Trump administration covering for satanic pedophiles. Isn't that what they were telling us? You know, it's why it shows you that they don't even care about the things they profess to care about, at least when it goes up against Trump's direction or, a Trump first direction as opposed to America first. Now, Spiro rightfully points out a point that we haven't even gone over, which I think is relevant to mention in all of this, as it also actually relates to Twitter, AI, XAI, and AI in general. Spiro says both found to be not guilty in the same week. Back to sleep. And it's a picture of Epstein and P. Diddy. Now, I don't think you could say that Epstein was found not guilty, but the point is ultimately that, you're not doing it. The point is made, I think. He's trying to make a point. And the idea that Diddy in this is an interesting overlap. Same kind of point, though, for both angles. The interconnectivity of all this, but also the fact that this guy's a part owner of Twitter. Can you imagine? Same old thing. Imagine if it was a bunch of D's next to the name. If it was a Democrat running Twitter and he was a Democrat that got caught and they would, oh my God, Twitter was a human trafficking platform. No, with no evidence, as they usually do in partisanship. But it's funny to see how they react and don't react when it's something that's on their side or not. But with the Diddy point, here's Elon Musk back in 2024. How many people in music industry knew about this? About P. Diddy being accused of abusing 9-year-old boy. And I'm not even getting into yes or no on that. I'm just making a point about the connection to Elon and the conversation of today. Liz Crokin rightly points out, Elon, you've admitted that he's your friend and that he's an investor in Twitter. So you act like you did, it's a weird way to frame that, especially when, again, the point was you're being accused of it, not even found guilty yet. And let's not forget that, yes, here is USA Today. Sean Diddy Combs is one of the owners of the background of Twitter. Investors, owners, like he owns a part of Twitter. I just find it to be wild that no one wants to talk about that in the side that usually talks about that. You know where I'm going with that. Now, Elon Musk comes out around that. I think there's overlapping points that can go in even further than that, but we're not focused on him today, other than the part we might end with if we have time about the party. He says this today. Elon Musk puts this out. The image saying the official Jeffrey Epstein pedophile arrest counter, and it says 0. He says, what's the time? Oh, look, it's no one has been arrested o'clock again. It's just, so think about the amount of criticism he's coming at, you were just like a hair away. You were part of this team 20 seconds ago, telling us they were going to save the world. And now suddenly you're accusing them of covering up for pedophiles. That escalated quickly. I mean, it just needs to show you, as always, that either they were always lying to you before, or the simple point is that if he's now doing this, that means he was either covering for them before or somehow was unaware of all the things that you can see and now is willing to call them out. It's like the people that covered up for Epstein until later it came out and they said, oh, we all knew. Well, that's him right here. In regard to everything else we're talking about, government corruption, Israeli influence, all the things that he was seeing there, all the lies about DOJ they were spinning. Now he wants to call it all out. Now he wants you to believe there's only a one-party system, which we should all know. But then why were you telling us the Republicans were going to save the world 20 seconds ago? Guys, it's just insane. And this is why everybody, I think, whether they like what they're saying or not, are being forced to come to terms with this right now. Thank God. Two-party illusion, guys. False binary. You've been played a long time. We all were at some point. Don't feel bad about it. Just start doing the right thing. Start calling it all out like a lot of people are. Elon Musk, and again, this is like we talked about, I had a good conversation on Fine Points this morning. We talked about this in particular. And the same kind of point is, Elon Musk comes out and says, the bill is bad, lots of spending, and and he's right that it's going to increase it's going to hurt our country in a lot of ways. The point, though, is that people then go after it because now Elon's on the other side. So now it becomes, he said the thing, now it's false. It's basic false binary partisan thinking. The point is, he is correct, but my point, I also think he's lying, or rather using that to manipulate you, using the truth. That's my opinion. And I might not get it today, but if at the end, maybe, but if not the next show, I think very clearly that I briefly touched on it before. The America Party dynamic feels very contrived, expected. And we should very much consider whether or not this was all the plan, or even because of this is now part of the new plan. I mean, can question it all, guys. But my point in saying that is that whether he's lying to you or not, or playing you or not, the truth is the truth, no matter who says it. He says Elon Musk, or the article says Elon Musk reacts to Epstein list report, says final straw. Musk, after the Axios report, said that the DOJ and the FBI have concluded that there were no evidence, Epstein client list, that they said that was the final straw, he said. He says, so then what is Ghislaine Maxwell in prison for? He says Musk posted, which is, he probably gleaned that off someone online. Musk posted to his X platform, referring to Epstein's former girlfriend and associate who procured underage girls for him to abuse and facilitated to somebody, which is the point. You can't have the crime if you're not, who is selling these things, or rather, who is the one buying these things. He says stuff like this does not improve people's faith in government, which maybe just be leading you all into his arms after he just got caught lying or sabotaged. It just seems crazy that you would go to him again. But the point is not that, like I said before, having child pornography on your computer is a very serious crime, and they should be held accountable for it, having material like that. But it's not the fact that that's all that the fact is they told you there was trafficking. That's the point to make. They told you that was the allegation, which you can't have the crime of trafficking if you're not trafficking them, right? The idea that these people are being sold to somebody else is where the crime is committed. And they're hiding that from you is the point. Now, a lot of people are conversing about this right now. This is today, July 7th, after spending weeks and months and years gaslighting you into supporting what this is, or, this grouping, acting like we were going to be saved by all of this. They were going to release the Epstein files. They were going to stop the globalist world order, all those things that are currently happening. This says exclusive analysis. Was Epstein video evidence destroyed by the Biden administration? And you see where this goes. Coping. Endless amounts of coping right now from the partisan liars. The idea that somehow the only thing you can consider is maybe the Biden team lied about it. Okay, well then why are they lying to you about that? Wouldn't they come out and say Biden deleted it all and that proves everything? The amount of coping going on is just embarrassing. Roger Stone claims Kash Patel is telling the truth, not covering up the crimes because they were no longer there. Ah, I see. So they're also kind of lying to you by omission. That's the positive story. And why would they cover for the Biden administration? You can't, guys, it just doesn't make sense, no matter how you spin it. But this is what it looks like to try to gaslight and cope and cover for the team you're on. Here, David Icke, or Michael Tracy says, Jones says, meet the old boss, same as the old boss. Now, by coming in and being part of the cover-up, the Trump administration has become part of it. You can't see it any other way. Well, yeah, and that's important to point out. Then when you go on to continue to support that team and continue to tell people they should and act like they're somehow lying here, but still the right side to support because the other side is worse, you're obviously part of the binary lie. As Tracy says, the inevitable result of online conspiracy merchants becoming GOP flunkies. Here's what David Icke says. How did they get Trump and the DOJ to do that, Alex? Come on, mate. You've been promoting a blatant deep state-owned fraud like the rest of the MAGA media, and Trump did this in a desperate attempt to save his own ASS. That's his opinion. I think this is about, well, I guess the way he's probably framed that is to release something that's a false story to hide that he is on that list. I agree with David that there's something else for sure, but the coping is just insane. It really is. It's not hard to see what's going on here. And at the very least, the level 1 point in this is that we're being deceived. Not to figure out why they're secretly the Democrats that are responsible. That's just exactly what it sounds like. Now, Miss Q Universe says, DOJ says Epstein killed himself and there's no client list. Trump's ex-labor secretary Acosta Federal immunity, which we all know, no clients, no operations. So what were they conspiring to do? Host a bake sale? And people are all calling this out. Q and, other people from every direction. David Icke says, well, and it's just his kind of summing them up. An investigation cover-up by Trump appointees finds there are no Epstein client list and there was no arrests, or there will be no arrests. This, by design, puts Trump in the clear for now, despite Epstein calling him my closest friend for 10 years. This has desperation stamped all over it. And will it even dawn on the MAGA media that you campaign to power the same mentality that you once claimed to oppose? The deep state, I do think they're beginning to recognize this. The ones that are honest anyway. The deep state, with its signature cover-ups and suppression of information, was not replaced in the White House in January 2025. It just changed its personnel. The Trump DOJ, Bondi, and FBI, Patel and Bongino, which, by the way, ask yourself why Bondi's not out there defending these conversations right now, says there's no credible evidence that Epstein blackmailed prominent individuals and no evidence that could predicate an investigation against uncharged third parties. Embarrassing. You wonder if Trump is going to make it to the end of his presidency for many reasons. Maybe he will, but is that Thiel-owned Vance doing warm-ups? All right, even if he gets removed, Vance is an obvious replacement for the same team. Now, here's what Zionist Miller put out. Top White House advisor touts historic string of promises kept. He put that out today. Of course, right? Because you got to do the rounds, right? Trump and everyone else, the FBI is moving forward. We're all on the right page. Everyone's happy and we're all on the same page because we're happy and we're not upset, right? Just tell you what you're supposed to think. He comes out and goes, promises kept all the time. Even Republicans are calling this out when he does this on Twitter. What about the JFK file? It's just very clear what's going on here, guys. Now, let's not forget to connect this to the next conversation. This is from August 30th, 2023. Epstein's calendar contained multiple meetings with Peter Thiel. Shouldn't be surprising when we see how this all comes together. Now, we're going to get into the next part about AI, artificial intelligence, weather modification, Texas, and how some of this might play into each other. There's also this report, recent, from June 4th, 2025. Jeffrey Epstein invested with Peter Thiel, and his estate is reaping millions. Investing, overlapped, meaning, clearly, you could argue it's just money, but the more you can see this network, the more you begin to see that there's something much bigger. Epstein was one part of what this is. Now, quickly a point about AI, XAI that overlaps with the conversation we're about to get into. We're going to talk about like I said in the beginning, let's go over it all again. Geoengineering, weather modification, the idea of Texas, the possible flooding, the water conversation for AI, why that might be relevant to kind of the circle that goes around all that. But CJ, you might have seen people, which again is kind of a cope, which is funny. The usual suspects out there going, Cat Turd being one of them, Grok is suddenly all woke. What's going on? Which, it's funny is they call it woke when they get something that challenges what they want to be the reality, which is just hilarious to me. If it's woke, and that's your team, guys. That's XAI, that's Elon Musk, that's the same thing. But what we all know, if we're not being children, is that it's not about woke one way or the other. It's about controlling the information. It's about identity politics. It's about censorship under the guise of hate speech. Whatever side you want to play, woke left, woke right, bro flakes, snowflakes. This is a point that makes, what I'm getting to is that I think this is kind of why suddenly everyone's like, it's woke and it's lying. Well, guess what Grok recently talked about, which is making a lot of attention. This person says, Grok is America independent from Israel. I think it was under an Elon Musk post. And it literally responded by saying, no, the U.S. is not fully independent from Israel. Billions in annual aid and powerful lobbies like AIPAC heavily shape U.S. foreign policy, often prioritizing Israeli interests over broader American ones. As seen in consistent UN vetoes and military support, true sovereignty requires untangling this influence. Wow. Yeah, meaning you're not sovereign because of Israel's influence over this country. That's what Grok said. You can decide if you believe that or not, but that is not okay for people that want to control this conversation. And so suddenly, Grok is woke. Grok is the left all of a sudden. Where it must be a holdover from the left. I've seen all of those floating around. I didn't see this one. I just asked when it will be free from Israel. Not relevant for the point now. But this is relevant for a couple reasons, just to open the door to the overlap, but also the idea that, let's not forget, guys, that XAI, Elon Musk, as I've talked about here, this was a DARPA program, guys. It literally ended just before he turned it into XAI and supposedly started this new thing. It is a DARPA program. Just like Total Information Awareness became Palantir. It's a government overlap. It is the lie. Okay. So what we're talking about here is, and involves Palantir, involves all of this, is the beginning of this new AI direction through this, all of it coming together. I mean, there's so many angles to talk about. It take too long with DOJ or the government, AI government involved with the actual administrations, or rather, the different, the GSA and the different locations of different, where they're basically turning it into AI run government. That's their own statement. The leaked plan, in fact, came out. I might be able to grab that since we're making the point. I think it was this one. Oh, no, it's not the wrong one. Well, here's the, here's the show, which I'll have the link included. And I guess since we're talking about this, I'll grab this one too. Now, when I do this, guys, it's only just because I want to have that on in the notes in case you want to look back for the previous shows that connect to it. We did this one on March 8th, the impending future of AI government, but who controls the AI? As well as the one I just discussed, which is proven. It's a verifiable reality, right? That the leaked, which has now been proven, that the Trump administration had plans that got leaked on GitHub that were about turning all of government into AI. It's exactly what we're talking about. That's not a secret at this point. So the point, though, is all of that overlap and where this goes, and realizing that not just the interconnected between all of that, but also the funding and the people around it, like BlackRock, we've talked about. And how interesting it was that BlackRock can literally fund Twitter, and that doesn't become the big deal, but if it's even slightly connected to anything Democrat, it's the end-all be-all story. It should matter equally on all of them because it is concerning. BlackRock is concerning. Maybe I'll grab those too, because BlackRock is interconnected to a lot of very alarming things. We've talked about this back in the COVID conversation. We called it the BlackRock takeover of the United States, the COVID coup, which is where they took over the Treasury. I mean, there's a lot of different examples, and I'll grab this one too. BlackRock's Panama Canal, just other articles discussing this, as this is the one I was going to grab too, if it's in there. Oh yeah, look at BlackRock invested in masks. There's one I was going to grab that Josh Walkos wrote that's not popping up, but he did a great overview on BlackRock in general. Anyway, all these are relevant for you to understand that BlackRock is interconnected with damn near everything, right? It is, I mean, they call themselves a shadow government. That's what they're called. It's the public discussion because it's behind the scenes pulling the strings. So my point is, this is not new. You know this because we've talked about it plenty of times, that the idea that XAI got funding from BlackRock. It was publicly discussed. We covered this in January. So this person comes out who we've already shown in the past of, doing things that were, deserved to be called out, being wrong about things. Grok just exposed itself by saying it funded by BlackRock. Well, so this is what's so frustrating, is this is a public story, but it becomes like this massive thing as if it was just uncovered. And so, well, good, I'm glad people see it. But isn't it weird the way this all works? The flow of information. Grok says XAI, which built me, received funding from BlackRock in its Series C round. Very public. It's very public. It's literally posted publicly back in December 2024. We covered it publicly. A lot of people talked about it online. But weird that it becomes like this breaking story. It makes me wonder why Twitter wants that for some reason, or why somebody does. Or maybe not. Maybe it just happens to break through. But I said, old news, if you've been following TLAV reporting, you've known this since the beginning of the year. And not because Grok says so, but because source material included within the TLAV article below, as always, demonstrating our value for you. You would have already known this and had the material to prove it, not just that Grok said, which I think is a relevant point to make. Now, what's interesting, it appears that tweet was deleted, which I just think adds a lot more to the point here. Here's just what it showed up in what it got sent to me as, like in my, signal got sent to me. And it says this right there. The same post he was just showing. XAI received investment from BlackRock. This is the link. You can see it. It says Grok right there. Why would they delete that? I think that screams exactly what you think, that somebody wanted that to be deleted. But so then the question is asked, why then? If it's a publicly reported story that gets pointed to, why is it deleted by Grok? I just think there's so many weird things going on, guys. I just wanted to point that out because I do think that's relevant. This is the article where we cover this. Twitter's free speech facade crumbles as its technocratic agenda takes center stage. Oh, hold on, let me grab all these. How did I not save these? There we go. So, keeping that in mind, the AI, BlackRock, my point in that part, which it'll make more sense when we go through it, is really to highlight for everybody the interconnectivity, like the larger agenda. BlackRock is involved with a ton of the larger globalist kind of overlapping points in technocracy, globalism. So if BlackRock's invested in this AI side of it, that means they have a very clear interest with massive, massive amounts of money, more than almost anybody, to put toward these things. So let's talk about the geoengineering part of this. Rather, geoengineering, weather modification, just briefly, and overlap this with the conversation of Texas, which I think is going to, even those that understand this story, what we're going to show you, which is also public, and I'm by no means breaking this story, is probably going to be pretty wild for most people that don't know this. Now, I want to just demonstrate, include some articles or shows we did with Dane Wigington, excuse me. This one was from February 26th, 2024. Geoengineering, nanotech, and biocarrier platforms for pathogen dispersion. This is the one we did not too long ago from the, oh wait, did I have that backwards? Oh, I did. That's interesting. I thought I did. So this is the newer one. This is the older one called Geoengineering and Climate Change, Gambling with the Human Species. And then this one was the last one about the pathogen dispersion. Now I'm going to play that briefly again, just to show you two things. The clip I played in the beginning. First, note that this patent he shows you in 1914 says Rainmaker, which might just be a coincidence, seeing as how it's kind of on the nose we're discussing, but that is the name of the company we're going to talk about. Not that there's any necessarily connection, because it's from 1914. But just quickly to show you this again, what he goes over in this, and these are direct patents, showing you exactly what people in many cases still pretend isn't real. The actual patents for geoengineering, for stratospheric aerosol injection, which are all different layers and areas of the same general conversation. Cloud seeding being a very simplistic version of something in the general realm of this, which people try to act like is totally not the same thing. It very much is. We're talking about manipulating the weather to cause weather to do what you want it to, right? Now, the difference is you're going to a whole new level when you get to things like stratospheric aerosol injection. But it is in the same umbrella, guys. It's the same conversation. But he goes through all these patents, goes through how clear it is that they're used on planes. It's very easy to look up. And I thought the most important part is this. He's right. There's so much evidence like this. This shows you could see them starting and stopping the technology. For those that want to pretend we're talking about contrails, right? Very, very clear. So that being said, there was a massive, weather event that happened in Texas. Death toll in devastating central Texas flash floods climbs to at least 95. Dozens still missing. And in general, I think I have those right here, asking just people about what they saw. Here, where was it? So here is what tinfoil hat girl had to say. Friend of the show. She says, I lived in San Antonio for 3 years, never saw anything like what they're seeing and what they saw. We flooded, but never like that. I lived in Midland, Odessa for over 2 years. Also, not that it's even the same location, but I saw similar thing, never what they're showing there for what that's worth. So here she's adding to that for her personal perspective. We'll come back to the tweet that it's showing. So first, just the fact that it's pretty severe, right? So anytime there's something like this that happens, it's not the idea that you should feel like you're not allowed to ask certain questions is so stupid to me. And it is designed to stop people from being critical, inquisitive. But as always, I would argue it's irresponsible to go forward with what you assume with no evidence, right? So be better than that. The point is that they try to scare you away from asking these questions. But like I said earlier, there are plenty of people in the field that want to use the truth or use the idea that is possible to use it in times where they want to manipulate you. Also consider that, right? So my point was, at the time, on July 4th, I could see no evidence that this was for sure happening. Just like I can argue today that you necessarily still can't prove that we saw something happen on the 4th. But I think we can prove at this point that there has been cloud seeding that took place in Texas, at least before or possibly after that. That is relevant to me. But so you would still be objective and honest enough to say that we still don't know for absolute certain that this was done on that day. But maybe it's not necessary. Maybe you could do it a week before, right? All that's worth considering. And that's all to say, again, that there are people that would push this out without knowing that for their own purposes, even just to guess at it and maybe get right. Facts matter to me. So, serious event. Brian Gamble, who I'm not familiar with, put this out. And this is on July 5th. having an old document. Here's the actual account, Rainmaker Technology Corp. The name of the person is Augustus Dorico, who's the owner. Another one of these, he even calls himself a tech bro. Another one of these, like, I'm blanking on his name, Anduril Lucky Palmer types, right? Like this, just like this very like carved out version of what they want the new technocrat leadership to look like. It's just very strange to me. And you'll see what I mean when I play it. This young kid with a mullet, it's just very weird. The point, though, is that Brian Gamble has a document he shared, which I can't verify, but post this on here, showing a document where they claim to have been hired to, which I'm going to get to proving that they are doing this in Texas, in Pecos, Texas, for what they do, for cloud seeding, Rainmaker Technology, right? Now, this was, you can go through it, but it's not the right date, though. The date for this, 3/15/2025, expected termination, 10/31/2025. So arguably, it could have been taking place in there, right? But the ones you can prove from before, bottom line is it's up in the air. So we can see that it's happening, but we don't know whether it's there, which is why they ask for public accountability. Can you confirm with transparency whether you were doing this on July 3rd or 4th? Now, I would argue the range could be pulled out at least another day to argue whether, maybe the second could still have the same effect. But nonetheless, the point is, were you doing this on these days? And then, give us material information and so on. So good on Brian for calling this out. Here's the document included, at least the screenshot of it, question at all. Now, here is what's interesting. General Mike Flynn comes out and says, I'd love to see the response in regard to asking that, which probably got him to answer. Now, here is Dorico saying, the natural disaster in the Texas Hill Country is a tragedy. My prayers are with Texas. Rainmaker did not operate in the affected area on the 3rd or 4th, or contribute to the floods that occurred over the region. Well, that's a big statement to make if you're, let's say you did it on the 2nd, right? He's saying, or contribute to them in any way, which so basically saying that whatever we didn't do that. Well, if you are cloud seeding in the area, it's worth considering that. But it's also not fair to assume we know for sure or blame him without knowing for sure, right? Be objective. Rainmaker will always be fully transparent, he says. He goes, a review of the timeline of events. Overnight, from July 3rd to 4th, most moisture surged in the Hill Country into the Hill Country from the Pacific as remnants of Tropical Storm Barry moved across the region. At 1 a.m. on July 4th, the National Weather Service, which we work closely with to maintain awareness of the severe weather systems, issued a flood warning. Note, summer collective cloud seeding operations in Texas do not occur during overnight hours. So even right there, you can see that they are cloud seeding in this area. And I'll prove this to you more as we go forward. At 4 a.m. on July 4th, they issued the life-threatening emergency warning for floods. Did Rainmaker conduct any operations that could have impacted the floods? He simply says no. The last seeding mission prior to July 4th was during the early afternoon of July 2nd. Look at that. When a brief cloud seeding mission was flown over the eastern portions of central Texas. What was interesting is, let me see if this was, no, it was pretty consistent afterward. I was seeing how long it took him to write these out. And he says, and 2 clouds were seeded. Very clear. These clouds persisted for about 2 hours after seeding before dissipating between 3 p.m. and 4 p.m. Natural clouds typically have lifespans of 30 minutes. Now, here's where we get into how do we, in regard to the natural one thing, but how do we know the real ins and outs of what your stuff does and what you're actually doing? We don't really. There's a level of expert know-how. Somebody could probably tell whether or not, it's possible or not. But even then, we don't really know the level of what's being used. We know what he's claiming, but with the level of technology today and what's possible, my point is we just question it. Question whether there's more to the answer that could have caused this to, be not what he's claiming, not to jump in any assumptions. The clouds, and he goes on to say, even with the most persistent storm systems, rarely maintain the same cloud structure for more than 12 to 18 hours. The clouds that were seeded on July 2nd dissipated over 24 hours prior to developing the storm complex. Okay, well, my question would be, if the clouds went away, is it possible for whatever you did in the atmosphere to have some kind of effect over the next couple of days to a week? I think that is possible. I think based on other things that could come into play, maybe even as it's designed, I do think that's possible. A senior meteorologist observed an unusually high moisture content prior to the event. So yeah, couldn't that be something that your actions caused, even inadvertently? I think that's possible. It was at the same point our meteorologist determined that we would suspend future operations indefinitely. Well, look at that. Very interesting timing. As you can see, we suspended, so literally suspended this indefinitely on the 2nd, 2 days before this happened. Seems like an important kind of timing. And why would they stop indefinitely right before unprecedented flooding? That seems interesting. To ensure safety and to prevent any risk of flooding from cloud seeding, I guess you could, to be objective, you could argue that they saw the storm building, the weather, the moisture building, and they said, okay, we're done. But why indefinitely? It just seems like an odd thing. It says the suspended operations in accordance with Texas Department of Licensing, listed below with the document. I encourage the meteorology community to ask questions and scrutinize their claims. Again, be objective. As much as it's easy to fall in line and go after, especially somebody like him who landed a Teal Fellowship, right? So at least overlaps in very prominent ways with the Teal, the Palantir Anduril kind of universe that we're talking about. He got but all he got was $100,000 in a 2-year networking mentorship program, but with Teal. And, so I think we all know that it's much more than that when these things happen. So here's a video of him from June 9th, 2025, right before all of this, which I just think, of course, with Sean Ryan. I think that's CIA Sean Ryan. I think it's, are we really going to, we have to remember the very big mistake that was made when they tried to push that story on you, and it turned out that the emails they were claiming was proven to actually have been typed. That is shocking. Either they lied and were involved with making those fake emails, or were that bad at doing even the smallest due diligence to verify something coming from the CIA. Come on, guys. I think most people got a very clear insight into what things like this are. But let me go through some of these clips for you. I actually have the video right here. So let's go to some of these spots that I have pulled aside. Oh, you can't see it, but here, let me go. So I've got the times on here. So we're going to start with 7:43.
In the union, they've been cloud seeding for the longest amount of time, or they've experimented with it the most because they need the water most desperately. So Colorado and California, Texas and Idaho, they all have weather modification programs.
That seems simple enough. Now, look, he said it publicly, but I do think this is relevant just to hear with his own words. Not that this is, it's a public thing. So this is not some big bombshell, but it's interesting in relation to what happened, and, and definitely stopping on the 2nd. It's very interesting. It definitely piqued my curiosity. So here is the next one. Starting at 50:02, it looks like. And there's oops. On full screen accidentally. There's a lot in here that's worth listening to other than that. Take, if you want to tough out listening to Sean Ryan. 50:02.
Well, first of all, the Western states aren't doing this. They're not doing it because they're so desperate for water that they're seriously willing to hear out the case for cloud seeding, right? So
remember, jumping ahead just slightly, the conversation of how much water is needed for not just the future, the current AI direction, what they're currently doing, but also where they want to build it out to. So whether this is just more manufacturing of consent for this direction, and how much of that is being done now, is it experimentation? Has it gone out of control? All these different questions. Just remember that there's when you ask about who benefits, right? Or why, the intent, which we can never really prove. It's hard you can't prove what someone's thinking and what they feel, right? But to know that there is a real obvious motive, profit and otherwise, with this direction to do any of these things, I think it just adds more context to contextualize the whole point.
Montana proposed legislation to ban all weather modification and geoengineering. They still banned geoengineering, but they carved out cloud seeding because they know it'll be good for their cattle and for their farms and for their municipal water supplies and for their aquifers. Texas did the same thing.
Okay. Very interesting. And this is not just about, we're past proving that it's happening in Texas in general. We'll make a few more as we go along. But the point there is the manipulation. We see this in Tennessee where they go, we stop spraying our skies, Bill, and then just spray a little bit higher elevation, which technically is not then considered what they banned. That's what's happening. And so they're still spraying. They just go, well, which I will still argue, and I agree with Catherine on this and the work that was done by the politicians there, as much as I will still always doubt them, and I'm a pessimist when it comes to politicians, that what they did there did take a step in the right direction. Now, so there's a specific area there that they are, at least allegedly, they probably still don't care, but are legally not supposed to spray. So that's one step. Let's do the next one, right? But that's where it stalls usually, because people think it's all over. They are still spraying in Tennessee. But if you can somehow box out just any number of ways they can spray, that would be the real goal. My point, though, is that if you can say we're making it illegal to do geoengineering and then act like cloud seeding is not really just a simplified version of the same direction, and allow that. Now, again, I'm not trying to oversimplify it. They're not exactly, there's very big differences, but it is what we're talking from an average person's perspective. We don't want the government putting things in the sky that are not healthy for you for whatever end agenda, because that's the point, people, despite the technical nuance, that's what we're talking about, whether it is barium and aluminum sprayed from a plane or whatever other variation we're talking about. I think most Americans are on the same page with this. So pointing out that they have a weird language manipulation, so you think they're not doing it, but they are allowing cloud seeding. And how long until, if not already, have they just altered the definition of cloud seeding to be whatever, almost encapsulate everything? You see what I'm saying? That's always what they do. Gain of function becomes EPPP, and it's the same thing, or if not worse. So next one, 5233.
I was going to bring, I don't want to cut you off. Go ahead.
Well, no, please.
I was going to bring that up because in his interview, I don't remember the chemical or whatever it is that they're using to, he was talking about how Elon Musk wanted to use this thing where basically he puts some type of a additive in a sponge-like substance and you run fans on it and it produces all this water. And that Elon wanted to use it to cool his rocket pads down there, and got denied because Texas was like, we don't know how to tax you on this.
Yeah.
Okay. That's an interesting overlap. Just hypothetical, right? The idea that maybe that's what we're talking about. What maybe something he wanted, the most, allegedly the richest person in the world, who seems to be able to, at least thinks he can do whatever he wants, wherever he wants, at any moment in time, and coerce things into reality. Maybe this is something that he was doing or wanted to happen, or, all these possibilities, but we don't have any evidence other than that statement. So we wouldn't argue we know that. The point is simple, that there's a lot of different moving parts of why people might drive something like this into reality, right? That's the only point being made today, really, is that this is something we shouldn't allow that could have been responsible for that. That's the truth. But the story in and of itself is that this is still going on, that they still pretend to somehow they often tell you it's not even real. It's just wild. As we get into the AI point, I think it makes it very clear that this is something, not whether these events are that or not, that I argue we're driving into. And it's not just water. We'll talk about the different, every element of this, we're driving in a position where they're creating scarcity for things that don't necessarily need it because of what they want to accomplish.
So then he had to use all of the regular water, which seemed like a huge misstep on Texas for not allowing him to do that and sucking up all that water. And
It's Texas's fault to stop him from taking all their water, because that makes sense, of course, because this is these people are all statist, but they're pro power structure, whether they claim that way or not. But it's interesting, right? So he ends up taking all the water, and it's just, there's all ways you could see this playing out.
A dry state.
Here, let's go to the next one. Okay.
That means that the cloud has to be cold enough for you to freeze it in the first place, which generally means that it's cold beneath the cloud too. Now, with respect to...
sorry for not... I figured you guys probably picked up on it yourselves. This guy is the guy we're talking about right here. He's got the Rainmaker on his shirt right there. His name is Augustus Dorico.
The rain, we're operating in Utah, Colorado, Oregon, California, and Texas. It's all rain in Texas. So we've been in our own rain there. Out in West Texas and the Trans-Pecos.
Again, if you need any more obvious, we've made our own rain there. He said it right there about Texas. That's not hard to wrap your mind around. And then there's still people that want to pretend like even this is not possible. Last one.
For that matter. Mullet Man Tech Bro does not play very well in the state legislature here. But we operate in Utah with their Department of Natural Resources, Colorado with their Department of Natural Resources. We're about to begin in Idaho and Wyoming, Oregon, California, Texas, We just started this week our first deployment in Latin America.
So I mean, just Texas is the focal point for this overlap. But guys, how are we allowing all of this? Why is this? Is that what you want being done in your skies? Do you want that to be? I mean, I'm not going to get into the. Maybe we'll, in a future show, go over what they claim they're doing and the potential risks. It's for me, it's about the idea of playing God and what they don't, like whether it's even dangerous, which it almost always is, what they're using and what they do. There are always, I mean, whether it's the aluminum barium point and reflecting sunlight or any number of things, different conversations, right? But that they rarely take into consideration what's healthy for you. My point is about what the side effects are, what this can do. Like we've seen with any number of these conversations where there are lasting repercussions based on manipulating a system against what it normally does. I mean, it's obvious to me. But as always, come to your conclusions about it. Don't take my word for it alone. So all that. Oh, and let's not forget Derek's article about this. Meet the Peter Thiel acolytes in Trump's second administration. They seem to be not just in this administration. This seems to be a building out scenario as they literally take positions in the military. You forgot about that. Like this is all happening very rapidly, isn't it? Detachment 201, as I called technocracy in uniform, as the CTO of Palantir and Meta and OpenAI get sworn in as lieutenant colonels in the military. Because that's not incredibly terrifying. But Beef Initiative comes out with another document. Now, this one is from the 6th, which again, I think we all very clearly can see that there was seeding going on. But he says federal agencies paid a private cloud seeding company to spray Texas skies 2 days before the floods, which is what we just confirmed for you, using his statements, using what his own article said, and everything else we can see. So thank you to Beef Initiative for staying up on this and calling this out. He says, call it weather modification, call it a conspiracy, but it's happening. So, interesting, right? Just in and of itself, like the fact that that's just debated, that people debate these things, but it's a very public and easily proven conversation. Now, the question still is whether or not that was responsible for what happened. And look, you know as well as I that you can't just, we can say we think the evidence suggests that. I would even say that it's almost likely that the action taken on the second could have some kind of overlap with what happened there. But we can't say we know that for sure, as far as I could tell, unless you've got more evidence. Now, here's where I find this to be very interesting. The bigger point of why that might be the case if that's what happened, or just in general, why they might be doing this at a global scale to create more water for what they see becoming an obvious problem. Now, another point to make, and this is just one, but there's a ton of them. This is an image from July 6th from North Carolina, which was also experiencing some pretty extreme flooding, which when you start to stand back and look, whether it was Texas on the 4th or this and this, apparently a lot of places right now around the world, but in the United States in particular, are experiencing record flooding and rainfall. So that then kind of removes the extreme point of only Texas if it seems to be happening all over the place, right? So it kind of removes the focal point of it, why just Texas, when it seemed that adds to the thing we're going to get into next, that it seems to be more of a kind of larger issue. Now, some people would scream climate change, which I think we can all collectively laugh at the stupidity of the argument they keep putting forward, despite the fact that we know that the human species is straight up destroying this planet. That's not the same argument. Clearly, what the people doing it more than anybody are the governments and everything they're doing, and masks and gloves and all the things we're doing. And that's not about carbon. We're being lied to, in my opinion, but do your own research. The point, though, is clearly there's a lot going on more than just this one location. Here is an interesting video. I'll play just some of it. Not to necessarily endorse every claim made in this, but just to show this video the guy did, overlapping the same premise here. One, showing you a lot of different record rainfall flooding going on across the country, but also interestingly overlap with locations of major data centers, as well as the fact that we see the need for AI in the water point, which we'll get into more after this video, like proving to you these statements coming from a lot of different things. Great Lakes become a data center hub. AI water usage impact remains unknown. It is wild, by the way, how much water it seems that they use for these things. So first, here's this video.
GPT request, that's the equivalent of pouring out a bottle of water and powering a light bulb for 15 minutes.
Artificial intelligence requires servers to run much hotter. Water cooling will be necessary. Where will that water come from? Where will that water come from?
I don't know, maybe from record-breaking storms? Okay, so I'm telling you right now, you do not want to miss this video, so just stick around with me for 10 minutes. If you do not have the time right now for a 10-minute video, bookmark it, save it for later. So with that being said, as we heard with the original clip, AI takes a lot of water to run the data centers. As we can see right here from this warning from a TED Talk about AI's hidden water costs, where as we know, huge volumes of water is used to keep computer processing centers cool. As we know, AI is transforming industries, but its environmental impact is often overlooked. You don't say. As we just heard, AI consumes a lot of water. Ren explained how the growing demand for AI-powered computing is driving significant water usage, particularly in cloud-based data centers. Such facilities can require millions of liters of water to cool the servers that power AI models, often straining the local water supplies. Now, as we can clearly see, there is article after article about this issue. And again, that is because AI data centers rely on water-cooled systems, where the cooling process involves water evaporation, such as cooling towers that convert fresh water into steam, and then releasing it into the atmosphere for cooling. So every time that you ask an AI chatbot a question, you are consuming water. And as we can see down here, AI's water...
Isn't that in and of itself wild? I was looking over this today, and this is not even a new conversation, but I was really getting into this today, and like, in regard to the number that is being claimed, it just seems ridiculous. And as far as I can tell, it's disputed about the amount, but it's pretty consistently that it's just a lot of water. That when you're just simply going, Grok, what about X, Y, and Z? That you're literally evaporating a ton of water with that one back and forth. It seems hard to wrap your mind around, but it makes sense when you look it through. And so this needs to start building into the possibility, even if everything we're talking about whether it's been done is a no. The idea that we're inevitably going in a direction right now where this will be required based on basic math and what we have and what we're, basically what they're going to continue to utilize will cause the shortage without question, unless they create more, is the argument anyway.
Consumption is called blue water, which is water from rivers, lakes, and groundwater sources. Now, I'm not sure about you guys.
Oh, and so just in case you missed that, the point is that I find on top of it very interesting, and I'll play it again real quickly, is that it's not just any water. It apparently has to be like fresh, clean water, which just adds to the craziness of it all, right? The idea that that's, the one source. Like, so the idea that this would be more important than, I don't know, people in the world that don't have any water and they're struggling. Again, that's a point that many people won't care about, why should we care about, a lot of compassion leaving the world today, but just the idea that the clean water in and of itself. And so then the question arises, are they using natural water sources to the point where it's being depleted and removed? Are they using aquifers? Are they using, so this is my point, large point, going back, let's put it this way. How long have they been aware of this? How long has this been in the crosshairs? And does that play a factor on things like Flint, Michigan? These different water conversations we've had over the years where with Flint, for example, they decide to shift to a different water source. I think that at least worth considering whether this has been a long time coming.
Millions of liters of water to cool the servers that power AI models, often straining the local water supplies. Now, as we can clearly see, there is article after article about this issue. And again, that is because AI data centers rely on water-cooled systems, where the cooling process involves water evaporation, such as cooling towers that convert fresh water into steam, and then releasing it into the atmosphere for cooling. So every time that you ask an AI chatbot a question, you are consuming water. And as we can see down here, AI's water consumption is called blue water, which is water from rivers, lakes, and groundwater sources. Now, I'm not sure about you guys, but AI water usage is not the only thing stressing the local water supplies. Where as of right now, we are witnessing mass flooding in Texas, and we also saw Tennessee being hit with record rainfall this year. Let's not forget about North Carolina last year with record rainfall, while also witnessing record amounts of atmospheric moisture fueling heavy rainfall in western Pennsylvania and northern West Virginia. And while we're talking about states here in America, we also can't forget about earlier this year in May, Kentucky experiencing record rainfall. Now, it's not just states here in the U.S. facing this. We also saw last year of 2024 where the UAE faces record rainfall and flooding. Now, what do all these areas have in common? Oh yeah, that's right. They all either have or they are planning on having AI data centers.
Now, I will add to this that you could find an exception, right? You can find areas that have had incredible flooding or rainfall without at least immediately in the center of it a data center. The point is still relevant, right? And that I would even add that whether or not they have data centers is sort of largely is irrelevant in the long term, because rainfall anywhere will add to excess of water that could be used in some way, but it makes it easier, obviously, if it's right in your backyard. But I do agree with the logic of what's being outlined here, but not that we're just blindly, the evidence is always needs to be there. But I think if we can prove that we know, and we can prove that weather modification is real, I think it's obvious. And even that seems to be a stretch for some people. The evidence is there. I'll get off on a tangent. And so that's clear, in my opinion. And the evidence shows. And so if that's the case, then why wouldn't they? Why wouldn't they try to do this? If they're already flirting and manipulating things around climate change, which isn't even the real conversation, reflecting sunlight, why wouldn't they have been doing this for a very long time? I mean, to me, that's not you shouldn't use that to say we know, but that's, to me, just makes more sense than anything. How many times our governments have experimented on us for a certain end without even even asking? Compulsory moral bioenhancement, all these different points that this would logically already be happening. And that they don't need it to be in every exact location, but just rapidly increase over the country more rainfall. Worth considering.
As we can see right here, Amazon expands AI footprint with $10 billion data center investment in North Carolina. What a wild coincidence. You have the XAI data center in Memphis, Tennessee, which just so happens to be the world's biggest supercomputer. I'm sure it's just a coincidence. There's also Stargate's first AI data center in Texas. As we can see right here, Stargate's 500 billion AI push begins in Texas. Whereas we can see Austin, Texas is experiencing a surge in AI-driven data center development.
Now, I will just add to make more to his point, because I don't make his point is I think it's solid, but just that you could find a new one. You could find an example of, a data center that in an area that hasn't had, right, for example. But what he's really doing there is showing you the most prominent examples, XAI, Stargate, and each one of these major things just so happen to have record rainfall right in these areas. I do find that mathematically is a little bit hard to wrap your mind around.
Where they have the demand for AI infrastructure and cloud computing, but also raises concerns about the strain on the local power grid and also water supply and land use. Oh, you don't say. What a wild coincidence. Kind of seems like the lack of water won't be an issue. But hey, what do I know? And as we can see, West Virginia passes new data center development bill, where this bill aims to usher in an increase of data center development, where we can see West Virginia is actively positioning itself as a hub for AI data centers. What a coincidence. While we're at it, look at that. Amazon plans to invest $20 billion in Pennsylvania to expand cloud computing infrastructure and advanced AI innovation. You don't say. Now, we can also see developers unveil plans for large tech data center in Louisville, Kentucky. Oh, look at that. How much rain did Louisville, Kentucky get during this historic flooding event?
See, it's the historic that you can't really miss. Now, of course, you could say they'd be lying, right? But look for yourself. These places have levels that they've never seen. So that is why it becomes hard to, it's a mathematical thing. What's the likelihood that every one of the locations that are major data centers for the major AI push happen to each have record rainfall? That means ever. Think about that for a second. That seems like a very hard, certainly possible, but very, very unlikely to happen, when they need it to at the right moment. It's mathematically hard to wrap your mind around.
Back in April, Kentucky experiences record rainfall, according to Kentucky Climate Center. You don't say. Now, outside of the United States, we have the president in Abu Dhabi inking partnership to build massive AI data center complex in the UAE. As we can see, White House announces AI data center campus partnership with the UAE. Well, wouldn't you know, look at this wild article that came out February 24th of this year. Stuck in eternal drought. UAE turns to AI to make it rain. As we can see in this article, how the UAE has struggled with droughts in the past, but Abu Dhabi officials are holding out new hope. And that is
so the point simply being that they're openly telling you that we're using AI, which is kind of like an interesting circle back to the same point, to cause rain for the AI, right? So it's the idea being that they're using this to, you don't have to make an AI to use cloud seeding and geoengineering, but it's interesting to see that come full circle. But it's all right on the surface for you guys. It's all very public. I mean, if you look for it, it's not being discussed on Fox and CNN, that's for sure.
Because they are harnessing artificial intelligence to wring more moisture out of often cloudless skies. Whereas we can see among the initiatives is an AI system to improve cloud seeding.
Now, if you're using AI to take water out of something that's, cloudless skies, like, can't you at least, look, I'm not an expert on this, but can't you at least consider that could cause some kind of side effect, a repercussion? that causes the system itself, like the atmosphere to go. I mean, we've already seen, and let's not forget the actual point of the cloud, the reflecting the sunlight point, Bill Gates and all that to fight climate change. They made the argument that if they go forward with that, even though I think they're already doing it, that it creates a situation where if they ever stop in the future, it'll get way worse. But they argue that's okay because it's already going to get really bad and we're all going to die if we don't do it now, which I don't agree with. Like, it's so insane to see. My point in that, all that is that they're doing things that do have repercussions. I just don't like the idea that people like this are playing God that have effects on your life and your family and your backyard. You know, it's like, it's something we need to stand up and push back about. Not violence, stand up, push back.
The practice of using planes to fire salt or other chemicals into clouds to increase rain. Wait a second, I thought that was just a crazy theory by people who wear tinfoil hats. Well, to people's amazement, it is not just some crazy theory. As we can see right here, a new company that was formed this year called Rainmaker, where as we can see, they have the goal of solving water scarcity. What a wild turn of events. Look who's funding this Rainmaker Technology Corporation, which is a cloud seeding startup based in the US, which as we can see was founded by Augustus, who received a fellowship grant from an individual I can't say here because I've had my videos taken down before, but I'll just call him PT. So
apparently you're not allowed to say Peter Thiel on TikTok, or at least he feels that way. It's interesting.
A fellowship grant from PT's foundation. And as we can see down here, this indicates a direct connection between PT through his foundation and the founding of Rainmaker Technology. If this was all not a wild coincidence enough for you guys, it seems pretty wild to me how all these areas that we see these mass floodings and devastation also possibly have plans for these types of cities to be implemented. Texas, Dallas, and San Antonio ask the question, hey Grok, is this true? And while the Earth dwellers go on with their idolatry, ignoring
there's more, and I was trying to get to the right spot, but the simple reality is that is hard to ignore. Right now, again, the idea of cloud seeding is not, it's no way are we saying it's the same thing. It can, depending on how they're using it. But the simple idea is that this is a more simplified, it arguably in some cases more natural version, but it's the same point I'm making and doesn't always have to be, since we don't really know what they're doing, that it's playing God. And I think that's a problem. So here's another video. Miss Leaning points out, same thing. Increasing, this is another video. Same thing, increasing our electric bill in the South, these damn data centers and their AI. So here's a video that came out where they're talking about one specific location. This woman lives near a Meta, Zuckerberg Facebook data center. It's gigantic. And what it's doing, just in a general sense, to their water, to the area. And this is just one location.
This is our cold water pressure in the kitchen. This is where I fill up water for storage. Those are the things we have to fill up to flush the toilets.
So you can see the sediment from the data center. Wow, and that's just from the water coming out of your faucet.
Yeah, and this is what's in all the pipes. It's overwhelming because you really feel like you are up against this huge wall that you can't penetrate. There's nothing that you can do, and they don't care.
I'm here in Mansfield, Georgia, driving by Meta's new 2 million square foot data center facility. Facilities like this are being used to power things like ChatGPT and other AI tools that are becoming integrated into our daily life.
Data centers, going to be a very hot item.
This entire supercomputer is built to power Grok.
We see data centers as the most exciting asset class.
Meta is building a 2 gigawatt plus data center that is so large it would cover a significant part of Manhattan.
But data centers come with big costs, from light and noise pollution to the environmental impacts, to the potential rising costs of energy bills. These facilities put extraordinary demand on the power grid and require entirely new infrastructure.
Oh my God. They should be responsible for that, not us.
Search the internet for profits that Meta has made, Amazon, Microsoft. They can afford to pay for their own generation.
Your house is here and the data center is right there.
It's less than 400 yards.
Beverly and Jeff Morris bought their home an hour's drive from downtown Atlanta in 2016, but their roots in the community run much deeper.
Being in the country has always just been my peace and my therapy. When we found this place, we decided that this was it. It was perfect.
I was actually raised probably 5 miles from here. It felt like coming home.
The data center that's now the Morris' next door neighbor happens to be owned by Meta, the company you know for Facebook and Instagram, but has also been breaking into artificial intelligence. They started construction on this data center campus in 2018.
Definitely changed everything. They destroyed the environment, taking down all the trees across the road.
Beautiful pines, beautiful forest.
The light pollution is...
We don't have to have a night light in the house. You can walk around the house at night and see everything. It's that bright.
So the point is just simply recognizing the repercussions. Water is just one major part of it. But, you know, here's actually, it reminds me of this clip, the very quick version of it, of what Fort Detrick did to the surrounding area. You know, this is not unique. This is what governments and corporations have been doing as far as I've ever covered this stuff.
We have over 1,300 documented cancer victims right now, just in a 1 mile radius. I'll be quite honest with you, it's changed my life so radically. Sometimes I don't even know who I am.
1,300 people in a 1 mile radius. And what's causing so much sickness? It turns out all these victims have one thing in common. They live next to a military base called Fort Detrick.
Now, I'm willing to bet you in some point in the future, there's going to be similar things that we find around this kind of conversation for any number of reasons, not least of which are what they're doing to the environment in the area, or the lack of water, or, you know, there's a lot of other points to get into. But so this is where it becomes really interesting. So this is an individual article about one specific area, about the Great Lakes. And the title is, this is from June 27th of 2025. It says, as the Great Lakes become a data center hub, AI's water usage impact remains unknown. AI data centers pose a threat to groundwater. It says artificial intelligence is becoming hard to avoid. ChatGPT is becoming more popular than Wikipedia. Horrifyingly enough, Google and Microsoft have built AI into their products. AI has even made its way into Cleveland classrooms and the Cleveland Clinic. We have even discussed how Cleveland Magazine plans to explore the capabilities of AI. That's this platform. What is unknown to most is that a finite resource powers AI, clean water. AI data centers consume massive amounts of water, both directly to cool their servers and indirectly for electricity generation. A critical issue for the Great Lakes is that governments lack precise information. I bet you they know and don't want to admit it. They lack precise information on how much water these centers are already withdrawing from the lakes and what future withdrawals will be like. Why are they even allowed to pull water, a resource, from a natural resource? Shouldn't they be paying for that? I mean, maybe they are, and I don't see that. But either way, that seems like that shouldn't be something they allow. The New York State Sustainable Data Center Act, if passed, would require data centers to power in this area, New York State, power their operations with 100% renewable energy by 2050 in the state, while also establishing reporting requirements for the amount of energy and water they consume. Now, I added that because just first, the word sustainable is going to cause people to go, that's a woke Democrat thing, despite regardless of the politics, it should matter that this place is extorting and using your resources for its benefit, not for your, as a company. It's not a government entity, right? But on top of that, the idea of renewable energy. Now, you could argue that means windmills in this, which is probably what some people want from it, but simply just in this case, I would argue not using the clean water, the resource that will be depleted. You see, so it's funny that you can see that through the realm of the woke left Democrat versus right dynamic, or you could just acknowledge that politics aside, we should want sustainable and not using finite resources to power a company. Seems like a logical point. But it says it's not just AI data centers. Other data centers that drive our digital world rely on water. See, I wasn't really aware of the amount, you know, and not just I was aware that, for example, you use water to cool a number of things, machinery, you know, or servers. But in this case, the other one they mentioned up here, I'm blanking on the term, to running through things to cause it to turn and cause, both steam, but also just motion. But the point is that that I was aware that is a case that is used that way, but the amount and how much is wasted just for like an exchange with grok. I mean, I don't even know how we can rationalize this unless it's something that they're, either using something like, basically just something that's not taking water away from a finite resource, an area that where innocent people use it, or rather just people use it. It goes on to say other ones rely on water as well. In the greater Cleveland area alone, there are about 20 data centers, 20, 2 of which were recently converted from office spaces to data centers. That's where this is going. And we're going to get into the point I've mentioned in the past of spruce pines and the weird kind of overlooking of that point, which is shockingly more relevant now, isn't it? When everyone focused on lithium, when this was at the focal point of the epicenter. We'll come back to that. It's about the crystal that was for AI that was there in that one location. I think we've been played a lot, especially in this last kind of mainstream alternative media administration. But it says a megawatt is equal to 1 million watts. A watt is the rate at which energy is used and produced. For example, a 100 watt light bulb uses 100 watt hours, whereas 1 megawatt could light 2 60 watt light bulbs nonstop for a year, or run 2 fridges for a whole year. In 2021, the United States used 11,595 gallons of water per megawatt hour for cooling power plants. According to U.S. Energy Information Administration. Let me say that again. This is 2021. 11,595 gallons of water per megawatt hour. Apparently nonstop. Sam Altman, co-founder of the CEO of OpenAI, claimed in a recent blog post, without providing evidence, that each ChatGPT prompt a person enters uses 0.34 watt hours, and what he describes as roughly 1/15 of a teaspoon of water. Okay, and the article goes on to argue that that doesn't seem to be backed up by facts. But think about even just before he tells you the amount of water. If you're telling us that it takes a ChatGPT prompt a person enters uses 0.34 watt hours, and we just read up there, according to the U.S. owned data, that 11,595 gallons per 1 megawatt hour. So by that same argument, you're talking about basically 6,000 gallons for one question. That's based on the U.S.'s own data. Now, there's possibly more information that we're not seeing, or a no process. Okay, just comparing. But then, so he says roughly that 0.34 is 1/15 a teaspoon of water. Now, recent studies show different results. So we all know why a person involved in the company doing something people don't want them to do would fudge the truth. Happens every day. Not to say we know that for sure, but the science, take it for what you will, says otherwise. A 2023 study conducted by the University of California, Riverside, and the Washington Post found that using ChatGPT to write a 100-word email consumes more than 17 ounces of water. Very different than, than the amount of watt hours we're talking about. Just simply saying writing a 100-word email uses 17 ounces of water, right? Whether that could probably take you 5 minutes, right? But think about this. You're talking about 100-word email, and that's consuming 17 ounces of clean, fresh water. Imagine how many people are using these things and how many people, the world around. I just don't even know how it's sustainable, guys. And it says that same study claims that if 1 out of 10 working Americans prompts that weekly for a year, so just once a week for a year, it equals almost 436 million liters of water, which is essentially the amount of water consumed by all the households of Rhode Island in 1.5 days. I mean, this is just mind-blowing to me. So here are the articles I've shown you in the past. This is back, remember, this is from the North Carolina hurricane. And everybody was focused in on the lithium conversation, which I ended up showing you was not even really there. I mean, the lithium was there and their mining was there, but when we dug in, it was pretty clear that they had already, like, basically what the story turned out to be is that they didn't need that storm. They already had control of the area. So the partisans screaming about how they did this to take the lithium, and some people just considered that, which is fair. Others, as you well know, screamed over the top that we knew it, weather wars, and we know what's happening, despite, again, the fact that there is weather modification. This is my point before about lying, but using truth, right? My point is that you could clearly see that they didn't need this storm to do what they already were doing. So it felt that didn't make any sense. However, if you look at the map of where the storm hit, the lithium part was kind of like in the secondary area. If you look at the epicenter of the storm, right smack dab in the center. Again, if you want to consider whether the storm was done for a reason, I'm not saying that's the case. It could be. The point is that right in the center of that storm, you found spruce pines. Spruce pine, excuse me. As this article writes in Daily Mail, tiny backwater town in North Carolina will help fuel the world's AI revolution with enough quartz to power an entire $530 billion semiconductor global industry. Think about that. Now, this is another article. This is the one we covered on the show at the time. Spruce Pines Quartz Mine starts production after Helene hits North Carolina mountains. People across the world rely on just this small town, guys, even if they don't realize it. The area is well, that doesn't surprise me. Does it surprise you? Let me get organized again. We just got kicked out of the show. Let me know in the chat where you last heard me talking. So we were discussing. It doesn't matter what I do. It's just so crazy. Whether I try to use a different browser, it happens. I don't know anybody else that deals with this stuff in the regular. Like, it's just not like this. Doesn't surprise me. So let me know in the chat, give me somebody chime in. What's the last thing you heard? Just give me something to go off of. Let me put these back in real quick. Where were we? Just, I think, 2 last videos we're going to play. Presenting the town. Excuse me. Okay. Well, then pretty much right here. I think I don't think we missed that much. I want to make sure that this sounds good. Watch, the audio will be bad. Yep. So here, the bad audio right now is what it reverts to without you knowing. Now watch. Hopefully you can hear the difference right there. That's what it should sound like. This just forces me into these things without asking. Fantastic. Okay. So the point here, guys, to pretty much wrap up on this point, and 2 last things at the end, is the idea that this was in the epicenter of the storm, right? This was important for the AI revolution, one place in the world. And this idea that this town is now, that was the last part, was one thing we covered that was, that's now relevant with a much bigger story, is that this town was being completely overtaken. Like the town, if you read both these articles, in fact, both of them mention it. The idea that these towns were being, they were losing the town because these massive data centers were moving in. Not, they always claim we're going to bring jobs. No, they almost always outsource or use AI for their own things. And then so there's no jobs. And so what do they say in these articles? Well, they've watched all of their stores shut down. No, there's no malls. Everything's closing. And so eventually they're going to have to leave too, because they can't buy food from a data center, right? So they're going to get pushed and pushed and pushed. And these data centers are choosing these locations, in my opinion, because of that. Because there's nobody in these towns, there's no massive money interest that care about standing up and defending that you're basically slowly starving a town to death. So arguably, you can have complete access to the resources in these areas for you, like the courts. I just find that to be shockingly relevant to what we're talking about today. And of course, Trump's $500 billion Stargate program, which is one of these many different massive programs that are happening. And that's in Texas. So this is where I saw this part of it. Thank you to, I'm from just Not familiar with the work, just saw this today. She put this on the 1st of July. Name is Dr. Roshanak. She says, what is AI's dirty little secret? She says, clean water. ChatGPT is becoming more popular, and Wikipedia, Google, and Microsoft have built AI into their products. What it's unknown to most is that the finite resource powers AI is clean water. AI data centers consume massive amounts of water, both directly to cool their servers and for electricity generation. Now, I'll overlap with a bunch of these articles we can include from before. This is back, Jordan was talking about this back when the Flint crisis was happening. This was on December 20th, 2018. You know my criticisms of him since. Flint water, but he did great work on this. Flint water tests were doctored, covered up, and media refused to report it. Oh, you know what? I forgot. This is an old one. When I get done, I'm going to go back and re-add I think probably the BitChute in there, seeing as how this just had the YouTube back then. If you're new and up and coming in this field, guys, don't rely on YouTube or any one platform. You'll get screwed by it. It's like this. But I'll include this, or you can look for other platforms. The point is to see that they chose this. Like it shows, and to be clear, when we covered this, it was well after the fact. It was just our covering up of the proof, or rather the cover up of the proof. The idea that this is something that, they switched away from a water source and then switched to a source that was compromised. Now, it could be just an overlap, but it could, to think about whether, how long they've known this is coming. How long have even they signaled that AI was the future? So how long have they been aware of this, and have there been subtle moves or not so subtle moves to prepare for this? It's worth asking. Here's an example. This is from April 16th, 2018. How the U.S. occupied the 30% of Syria that just so happened to contain most of its water. Not oil and gas, but maybe there's a reason for that. Again, these are just articles that popped up, and considering past actions, maybe it has nothing to do with it. But the idea that water would eventually become this important, I think, is quite obvious. Here's one from 2018 as well. Genocide. As Gaza dries out, Israel turns off the freshwater spigot. Now, that's really just about them turning off their fresh water. But just, these different thoughts about whether there's more playing a role in the coveting of this water. As well as the bigger picture, before we finish with another point that's probably going to add more to this, that's more alarming, is the idea that we already live in a position right now where our water is compromised. Derek's been covering this for a very long time, well beyond the fluoride point. This is Derek's article back before we were even working together. I think I was covering it from his platform. Or maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this was when we were working together. I forget when we started the overlap. But either way, Derek's work alone, regardless of where it is worth your time. 2017, why is the media ignoring America's drinking water crisis? And it's shocking. It's not just Flint, the amount of lead in water across this country or other things. It's ridiculous. This one was from 2017 report. Nearly all U.S. drinking water contaminated with cancer-causing chemicals. That's the PFAS and plenty of others. We knew about it back then. We still pretend like it doesn't matter now. They do anyway. This one, 2018. Are you one of the 170 million Americans drinking radioactive tap water? Now, these aren't fake things, guys. You can read this report right there. But it's just people don't talk about this stuff. Here, this is from 2017. Whitney Webb wrote this. War, corporate profiteering among factors pushing over 2 billion people in the world to lack safe drinking water. So just showing you it's not even just the United States. We know there are plenty of places that struggle, but from a worldwide perspective, have we been watching a shift? It's worth considering. This is from 2017, also showing you that the bottled side of this, in a lot of ways, is not much better. Study finds more than 24,000 chemicals in bottled water. Which ones are harming you? Also, somebody pointed out to me a long time ago their opinion, their logic on it. But the argument being that if government or somebody else wanted to contaminate water to go at the most people, they'd go after bottled water. Was the argument anyway. Now, even I at the time was arguing, I think more people drink tap water. But he argued that the stats at the time were showing that most people, in all things considered, more often drink from a bottled water. I thought that was interesting. And so just consider that in, future points. Now, this is the added points as well. So beyond just the water, just the idea of the AI or just data centers in general and electricity and usage and so on, in any way that's being, there's a lot of resources being used. This is from ABB. What's ABB? I'm not familiar with the group. I just saw this when I was searching around. And this is from July 3rd. And it says, artificial intelligence is projected to drive 160% increase in data center demand over the next 5 years. They're about technology and stuff. And it says, we are helping data center operators overcome today's most urgent challenges. The point, not only are they using massive amounts of water, but what they're telling you is they're right now, with the direction they're building in, whether we like it or not, are projecting to drive to 160% increase in the demand for those data centers. So you can see how quickly, exponentially, this will compound. How about this? Mike Zaccardi points out, he's a financial writer, we're going to need bigger data centers. AI capex from the hyperscalers is going huge. He simply says that because of where this is going, you're going to start to need bigger and bigger data centers. So you can see you see what I'm talking about? You see the 160 increased need for data centers, and as they continue to need them, they're going to need them bigger. And it's just a self-fulfilling prophecy. This seems to be inevitable if we keep going in this direction. Maybe that's the point. Maybe once you create a dangerously finite resource with something literally everybody needs, you're the most powerful thing in the world. I hate to be so dark about it, but let's realize what governments truly need: control over you. The IMF says the AI boom, this was posted on the 6th, means the world's data centers are more The AI boom means the world's data centers use more electricity than almost every other country. So we're not even just talking about water. The idea that an individual data center, or rather the way they say it, the world's collective data centers use more than every country. I mean, I don't see how this is even sustainable with where we're going in all of this, but you guys can consider for yourselves. Here's a clip that I'll get into. I'll play a little bit of this clip, actually, and then we'll finish off with a couple points that 7C's made. And I think we'll come back to the party conversation later. Some good points you made in about that, but this seems to be a good focal point to end on. So here's this clip. This is from Gen X Girl, and it says, this is bad. So the reason AI computers or companies that had that ridiculous 10-year ban on states regulating AI, which at the moment is pulled out, I'll touch on in a second, is because the massive data centers they're building all over the country use major fresh water, use major electricity, and dump pollutants everywhere. All three of which we've addressed on this show today. Play a little bit of this clip. Now remember, the point about the bill has not technically happened. Like right now, there's still an opening. They've removed the 10-year moratorium. There's inconsistencies between both sides. And the point, as far as I can tell, is that they could still arguably add something back in, whether it's the 5-year, which they floated in between. Now, unless I'm missing something and it's already beyond that point today, then you let me know in the chat. But as far as I can tell right now, should they want to, when we're focused on other things, there could still be the added somewhat idea of the moratorium with all of this we're talking about. So think about that. Now, even if it doesn't happen with this bill, it's like they do every other time, right? When they see that they're failing, they pull back, they reorganize, they come at it from a different angle. That's what they've always done. So stay vigilant is the point, right? Well, here's this clip.
Endgame mentality of let's just let these companies run rampant around the world so that ultimately whatever their assets are become our assets is leading the Trump administration to have a completely hands-off approach to AI regulation.
Her point, in case you missed that, is to say that like a Palantir. Now, of course, she seems to view this from the idea that the government is more in control, which maybe it is. But the idea that she's making is that, let's say Palantir or any number of these companies, basically like in Honduras, right? That I make that point about them just with Prospera, just seizing territory. It's crazy. It might as well be a military. Hey, they are now a military. The point is that for her arguments from the government's perspective is, well, let them run rampant. They'll seize things and take what they want, and it kind of becomes ours to be control, right? Maybe maybe they think that way, and maybe they're unaware that they're the ones being used and controlled at this point, or she's just simply wrong about who's in control. But the point is the same, that they are doing that. And they are basically, this is a technocratic overtaking of our world, is what it feels like right now.
They're quite literally, they proposed the big, beautiful bill, which passed the House and is now going up to the Senate with a clause that would, if implemented, put a 10-year moratorium on AI regulation at the state level, which is usually, the state level is usually where sensible regulation happens in the US. So they're doing all of these actions now with wide-ranging repercussions that will be very difficult to unwind in the name of this idea that maybe if they just allow these companies to act with total impunity, that it will ultimately benefit the nation state.
How do people like Sam Altman look at the rest of the world outside the US? These kind of tech leaders, and how do they look at little Britain and Italy, and how do they look at us? What do they think about us?
Little Britain. That's not very accurate. Britain is a leading manipulator in the conversation.
You've been inside their minds.
Yeah. I mean, they see them as resources. They see different territories as different types of resources, which I mean is what older empires did. You know, they would look at a map and just draw out the resources that they could acquire in each.
And that's where we're going back to, I think.
Geography. We're going to go here and acquire the labor. We're going to go here and acquire the lands. We're going to go here and acquire the minerals. I mean, that's literally how they talk. Like when I was talking with some OpenAI researchers about their data center expansion, you know, there was this one OpenAI employee who said, we're running out of land and water. And he was just saying, yeah, we're just trying to look at the whole world and see where else we can place these things. What other geographies can we find all of the conditions that we need to build more data centers? Land without earthquakes, without floods, without tornadoes, hurricanes, all these natural disasters, and can deliver massive amounts of energy to a single point, and can cool the systems. And they're looking at that level of abstraction to what are the different pieces of territory and resources that we need to acquire.
I mean, think about that picture. And, you know, and then it explains itself for why they need to stand up and go freedom and liberty and MAGA and America first. Well, they don't care about any of it. None of them. Right. I mean, it's literally just seizing what they can through. I mean, again, I can't help but see the overlap of the Israeli Zionist agenda through this, whether that's because they see an opportunity to take power or because they're behind. You can decide for yourself, but you have to recognize that there are multiple things happening at once. One of that we're discussing today is very clear, but there's also government elements and, you know, the different power structures that want their piece of the pie. But the point is that you can see this, that this is just rolling out in front of us and that they're just seizing what they can, where they can. And I think we're going to, if we don't do something about this, not to make this is alarming, but we're going to wake up, like I keep talking about, and we'll be in it. You know, it'll just be a snap of the fingers and all of a sudden the curtain gets pulled back. That's what I literally see building in front of me. And I hope I'm wrong every single day.
And that includes other parts of the West.
Yeah,
that's not just the global south.
No, it includes other parts of the West as well. Yeah. So there have been rapid data center expansion in rural communities in both the US and the UK.
Mm-hmm.
And it always ends up in economically vulnerable communities because those are the communities that often actually opt in to the data center development initially because they are not informed about what it will ultimately cost them and for how long. And so I spoke with this one Arizona legislator who said, I didn't know it had to use fresh water. And for the UK audience, Arizona is a desert territory. There's a very, very stringent budget on fresh water. And after that legislator found out, she was like, I would have never voted for having this data center in. But the problem is that there are so few independent experts for these legislators, city council members to consult that they're the only people that they rely on for the information about what the impact of this is going to be are the companies. And all the companies ever say is, we're going to invest millions of dollars. We're going to create a bunch of construction jobs up front, and it's going to be great for your economy.
And whose fault is all of that? The ridiculous politicians who think they can trust a company who totally won't try to take from them. You know, you could argue, I mean, look, there's one or two things there. They're either that completely naive and incompetent and inept, or they know well that they're selling their own people out for a little bit of money. That's probably both in some cases. But I cannot stand her giving them that benefit of the doubt. That's insane. Like you didn't know they were going to do this. Well, okay, then if you didn't know the full repercussions, then why would you ever vote for it? Money, because or a job on the way out, revolving door politics. Like that's the reality of how this world operates. So in her good intentioned argument, here's what it feels like. Maybe she doesn't want to believe the world's that dark. Sorry, it is. And we have to be real about that, especially as we fight to make it less dark, which is what we're trying to do. But it kills me to act like that's not somehow that they got played by the big company. Yeah. And if that is the case, it's because they've been systematically placed in the positions so to be played by many different factors and players.
Yeah. I mean, that's all we hear about data centers in this country. And it's a great top line for the Chancellor and the Prime Minister because they can say tens of billions of pounds worth of investment. Okay, but in terms of long-term jobs, how many? And also, by the way, for that rural community in God knows where, you know, the northeast of England or whatever, you're not telling them that actually they can't use their hose pipes for 3 months a year because all the water's going to that local data center.
Exactly.
And it's quite extraordinary. And the most scary thing about all of it is, in the UK at least, the politicians don't know any of that. I sincerely don't think the Chancellor knows any of that. And there's no real, I mean, even if you use the prism of colonialism, imperialism with regards to exploitative economic relations between the United States and other parts of the world, they think you're a Trotskyist.
Yeah.
Right? That's the crazy thing. So they can't even look after their own people. Because if looking after your own people boils down to being too left wing.
Well, I think part of it is also that they don't really.
And that in some cases it can be. Some cases there can be in a secret one left or right agenda behind what makes sense. But nonetheless, the point is, arguing what they're doing is wrong and arguing we should try to stop it from this level is like it's the same thing we talk about every day in this conversation. That you are, like I just said about sustainability, which is not good, or sustainability is a positive thing in a general sense, not the lie they sell you and claim it's sustainable when they're doing something else. The problem, though, is that people now get trapped in this broken logic of that's a left-wing thing. And so then you end up opposing something that's good for everybody in the general idea of being sustainable. Same thing here. You know, that plenty of people will push back on this idea as being a lefty, when in reality, you're just highlighting this vulture, this company who is just taking advantage of everybody. And I don't think these politicians I think they know they're playing dumb. They'd always rather be seen as incompetent than criminal. Remember that.
They realize that it's literally happening in the UK. So to connect it to the UK, data center development along the M4 corridor has literally already led to a ban in construction of new housing in certain communities that desperately need more affordable housing. And it's because you cannot build new housing when you cannot guarantee deliveries of fresh water or electricity to that housing. And it was due to the massive electricity consumption of the data centers being built in that corridor that led to that ban.
That's nuts.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the most valuable real estate for housing in the country, the M4.
Yeah.
And do you think UK politicians are aware of that contradiction, or is that that's?
I mean, I don't know if they are aware, if maybe they don't have awareness, or maybe they are aware and they're also thinking of other trade-offs. I mean, now in the UK and in the EU at large, there's just this huge conversation around data sovereignty and, of course, technology sovereignty. There's this whole concept of developing the EU stack. And why is it that we don't have any of our tech giants? Why don't we have any of this infrastructure? And like Keir Starmer just said this week during London Tech Week, we want to be AI creators, not AI consumers. So I think in their minds, maybe this is a viable trade-off. We skimp a little bit on housing for the ability.
I just can't stomach that. I mean, it's a fair statement. It's objective to consider that possibility, but I just don't believe that. I think it's very obvious what they know what they're doing, and they're simply selling you out. Call me a pessimist. I think we have every reason to be. Now, a couple of overlapping points that are interesting. 7C said, I made this video back in January based on the research I was doing last year to tell everyone that all nuclear-powered AI data centers would be coming. He says, and that they would all roll into a queen bee along with global satellite connections, a global cloud of interconnected cloud servers, AI, cryptocurrency, and more. He says the queen bee is shaping up to be Palantir. He says, I believe, and which makes perfect sense with what we know and what we can prove, right? That this, as Derek wrote, welcome to the Palantir world order. It's not hard to see. And he goes, I believe that once all of these systems are integrated and operating as desired, that will be the third temple. Now you could take or read, watch his work, look at the connections. I think it's very valid. And I think the point is, we could guess at what the intentions are or what the outcome might be. The point is to see the kind of 1, 2, 3 step into this direction. And he simply shows this down here, new Palantir partners with the nuclear company. Maybe it's something else. But I do find that to be interesting, at least for the thought of an alternative potential power source. Not alternative in the sense of something new, but just other than creating more power sources for what they want to accomplish. Now, he also added this. Sure, I didn't lose that. There we go. He also added this, and he says, in January, I made a video outlining the coming technocracy. I dedicated a portion of that to nuclear-powered AI data centers and nuclear energy exports. Today, and this was on the 23rd of May, Trump signed an executive order, and you probably remember this, to speed up the approval process for nuclear reactors and AI data centers. Coming right back around, right? And so you've been able to see this coming and what they're building towards. And the nuclear aspect of it is additionally important, I think. But clearly the point is it's all going in this direction. Maybe this is just another bolstering of that direction to make sure. Now, I'll come back to this. We'll discuss this in the next show. I just think it's interesting about the America Party direction and what that shows us. What I just said here was, this is my general sentiment on this right now. I said, it seems clear that the usual partisan lines and media government control over the narrative has completely collapsed. I know you guys all see it. I said, so I think what we're seeing right now, i.e. Elon's new party, Tucker Carlson, the whole weird ship, Tucker's like, everyone's like, now you're pro-Iran and now you're on, it's like Elon and Musk or Elon and Tucker and like a couple others, like, it seems like they're almost like they're being forced into the same team. And I think that's kind of by design, in my opinion, is a rapid, I said, to say it again. So I think what we're seeing right now is a rapid and seemingly desperate reorganizing of the system that they know they've lost control of. And this is what's funny. I said, surprised to find out that right now, if you type in question everything into the GIF search bar on Twitter, that this GIF pops up, which I just typed that in to put something in there. I was like, oh, look at that. I jokingly said, we've finally made it. I put that on TLAV website under my bio, and somebody, I guess, grabbed it and put it on Twitter, and now it's a GIF. I love it. I use it everywhere. Now, I'll also include this. We'll talk about it when we get into it more. Our buddy Craig Pasta was on RT talking about this and does think it's largely a publicity stunt, but has some good thoughts on it. I'll include it in the show notes, but we'll go over this in the next show when we talk about this topic in general. And really the interesting point that Elon Musk doesn't seem to be doing anything about this party, which, it's early. Like I said, somebody else, it's like 3 years now of promising. So it'll be a long time before you ever see them deliver, which I'm willing to bet you already. It'll be just like everything else. Promises, then shifting, based on whatever the narrative becomes for why they couldn't do X, Y, and Z, or somehow at the same time promised everything and delivered everything, even though they didn't. My point is, not a lot of action. You've seen some campaigning conversations, you've seen support of different politicians, but nothing official worth pointing out. And I'll read this post from Trump as we get to it later, and I'll leave you with this. Jack Posobiec says the same point. Oh, that's right. I was just sharing the meme here to end with. He just that point from Epstein. If Trump was in the Epstein files, why wouldn't they put? Because partisanship is a lie. Don't get caught up in picking sides. Get educated, research issues. The more people play favorites and stay loyal to their team, the more the deep state will continue to volley society back and forth through illusory partisan politics. Oh, nice. Greg Reese commented under Jack, said, it's called deception, the art of convincing one or many of recipients of untrue information. It's just funny. Clear political agents like you do it 24/7. Perfect. I'll include that one too. Well, we'll leave it there today, guys. Hope you gained something from this. I found this to be very, very interesting. Again, as you saw, a lot of it is, just conversation about possibilities with, always starting with something we can prove. I would add on the way out, that's the big difference right there. I should say rarely. There's examples in the past where I might have done this, but very rarely will I take something that is completely unverified, something that's not proven, like no part of it, and then build a narrative around what might be happening with something we can't prove. What we will do is take something like weather modification, geoengineering, that I argue can prove, that I think the evidence backs up. And then if there's conversations about whether it happened in a certain location, well, like we did today, well, let's discuss the validity of the thing. And then here's the evidence we can see around that. And usually with those cases, it ends up where we don't know because we don't. So think about that with the kind of people that will build into something based on literally nothing because it works for the agenda. And it's everywhere today. So if you appreciate platforms like ours that care about what's factual, care about what we can prove, principles, integrity, guide the conversation, then you will want to watch our future shows. You'll want to support the Independent Media Alliance, which we have a show coming, a panel coming out tomorrow with basically we wanted to kind of do a couple more after this as well, sort of the conversation of the building control grid, as Catherine calls it, and the steps that have been taken thus far. So we had one recently, and a lot has happened since then. So we'll be talking about this with Catherine tomorrow about the steps taken thus far. It will be on this platform, but still eagerly awaiting the Odyssey kind of completion of the portal so we can start putting it largely there and not funnel IMA stuff through TLAV, because I don't want it to be seen as an only TLAV thing. It's really not. And so point is, if you want more of that entire group will bring it for you. But if you believe in what we're doing, if you believe in the work, if you appreciate the work coming out for free, show us what it means to you down below, because we can't do this without you. Thank you all for being here. I love you all. As always, question everything. Come to your own conclusions. Hold on. I had a sneaking feeling that there was something I was going to play on the way out, but doesn't look like I have it. Any requests? Trying to think of something that, oh, you know what? I was going to play this one a few shows ago that I just think is actually relevant. I'll end with this one, but thank you all for being here. I love you all. As always, question everything. Come to your own conclusions. Stay vigilant.
Anyway, welcome to the State Department. I think we have some interns in the back. Welcome. Good to see you in this exercise in transparency and democracy.
Is that what it is?
Sorry,
I
didn't mean to break
I thought
out
it was an
laughter.
exercise in spin and obfuscation.
All right. Can you tell us my last briefing before vacation? Anyway.